actually do.
Morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Counselors, members of the public. Hope everyone had a great summer, although technically there's a little more summer left. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Hearing none. Could I have a confirmation of minutes of the June 13th, 2017 minute? Councilor Perruzza, yeah, you'll move them. All those in favor? Do those hands go up? That is carried. So we have a number of timed items, so we can move quickly to the non-timed items, and let's see how many we can get through in the next. Well, the first timed item is at 9:45, but let's go through the non-timed items. Just as a notice to members of the public who are here to speak on item number 5, demolition of designated heritage property. There's 3 people on the deputants list. I should advise you at this point that this item is being withdrawn. The property's been sold to another third party, so we won't be hearing this item. So,
Mr. Speaker, that's actually my item. Could I move the motion on that right now, and
I'd be happy to take that motion now to withdraw, so that
formal
these people
motion.
they can go golfing or swimming or whatever they want
Okay,
to do.
thank you. That would be great, and then we could wrap it up. So
Sure.
if the clerk could put it on the, it's 24.5. This body has deferred this several times, and for good reason. And the outcome has been a very positive one in that the properties have been sold, so the buildings will remain. So this is this motion is to withdraw item NY 24.5, and it's self-explanatory.
And we did have 3 people on the deputants list. They might come after this motion is carried, so I would ask that the clerk alert Eric Mellis, Barry Lubeck, and Leah Eckler.
So, Mr. Speaker, they're actually aware that we were withdrawing the motion,
aware.
and I don't believe they're in attendance or plan to come.
Great, okay. So let's move to item number 6. We'll get to the timed items out. Let's try and race through many of the non-timed items. Item number 6, Councillor Fillion.
Yes, I'll move it with 2 amendments. The recommendation 1 of the report from the Director, North York District, titled Preliminary Report Official Plan Amendment Zoning Amendment Application 121, 123, 135, and 127 Finch Avenue East, and dated August 9, 2017, be deleted and replaced with the following. 1, staff be directed to schedule a community consultation meeting for the lands at 121, 123, 125, and 127 Finch Avenue East, together with the ward councillor. And here's the part that's different. And the applicant be directed to revise the proposal to be in compliance with the policies contained in the Central Finch Area Secondary Plan. And then adding an additional motion that the notice area of the community consultation meeting be expanded to include, in addition to the 120-meter radius, notice area, all landowners and residents residing in the area bounded by both sides of Estelle Avenue to the east, Byng Avenue to the south, and Dudley Avenue to the west, and that the applicant pays for the cost associated with extending the notice area.
Thank you, Councillor Fillion. We can take them as a package?
Yeah.
Yeah. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 7, Councillor Robinson, preliminary report zoning bylaw amendments, 55 Erskine Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a motion, if the clerks could put it up on the screen. It's to extend the area, please.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Number 8 is mine. I will approve the staff recommendations from the supplementary report, which reduces the speed limit from 50 kilometers to 30. It's a staff recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Other questions for staff?
We approve.
Okay. Can I ignore that? Nothing. Number 9, we have a debutant on number 9, so we'll hold that down. Number 10 is, it's also in lovely Ward 10, and I will move the staff recommendations, which authorizes an all-way stop. Is that okay? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 11 is also in lovely Ward 10. I will defer that item to the next scheduled community council meeting. How do you feel about that? Okay. Item number 12, I will move receipt. That is, once again, lovely Ward 10. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 13 is Councillor Cole. Always stop control, Prince Charles and Drexel Road. What an entrance. Do you need a minute to get settled?
I'll move staff recommendations, please.
Staff recommendations moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 14, also Councillor Cole, road alteration Lawrence Avenue West at Dufferin and Corona Street via Bagnado.
I'd like to refer that to the November meeting.
So that is deferred to the next scheduled community, November. Sorry, November. All those in favor of deferral? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Carmichael Greb, Alway Stop Control Glengarry and Welland Road.
Yeah, I would like
The
to,
staff recommendation is deny.
I would like to move that that an always stop is approved at the intersection of Glengarry and Welland.
The staff recommendation is deny. The
Yeah, can
councillor
we
is
hold
moving
that,
approve.
can we hold that
Want to
item?
hold that down? Sure. Number 15, hold. #16, Councillor Carmichael Greb, speed limit reduction Fairlawn, Brookdale Avenue, and Greer Road. What would you like to do?
Adopt staff recommendations.
Okay, staff recommendations are moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Carmichael Greb, number 17, parking amendments, Bar Street.
I'm going to move staff recommendations.
Staff recommendations moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Number 18, Councillor Carmichael Greb, construction staging area extension, 2388 Yonge Street.
I'm going to move staff recommendations.
Staff recommendations moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Number 19 has a deputant. That is Councillor Carmichael Greb, so we will hold 19 down. Number 20, parking prohibition, Andale Drive. Councillor Fillion.
Move staff recommendations. There's no conditions. Staff recommendation.
Okay, staff recommendations moved. Staff recommendations moved on item 20, parking prohibition, Andale Drive. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 21, 50-kilometer speed limit, Finch Avenue East between Yonge Street and Bayview Avenue. That's Councillor Fillion.
Move the staff recommendations.
Staff recommendations moved on item 21. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 22, road alteration. This is Councillor Shiner. Has Councillor Shiner spoken to anyone about this item? You want to hold it down, see if it'll come? What would you like to? Yeah, the senior strategic director has made recommendations. We're on 22. So there are recommendations here. We can hold them down, see whether Councillor Shiner attends. Item 23, accessible parking space. This is Councillor Burnside, Roland Road.
I'd like to move staff recommendations.
Staff recommendations moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Always Stop Control, Apache Trail and Navajo Drive. That's Councillor Carroll.
Yep, move the staff recommendations, please.
Staff recommendations moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 25. Councillor Carroll, parking prohibition, Hobart Drive.
Yes, it's confusing to read, but move staff recommendations.
The confusing staff recommendations are being moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I have a hold on item 26. Councillor Minawong, what were you doing with item 26? You move approval. So staff recommendations are being moved. Authorize always stop control intersection. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 27. Councillor Minawong moving staff recommendations, installation of traffic control signals. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 28, Ward 10, parking restrictions Elmore Avenue. I will move the staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? Those are carried. Item 29, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr.
Parking
Chair.
changes?
Yes, if I could put the motion on the, I have a motion prepared, if the clerks could put it on the screen.
29. Parking changes on Erskine.
You don't have a motion?
There's no motion?
Okay, so then I'll just move staff recs. Oh, it's my memo? So what do I have to do? Just introduce it?
No,
Just move it. Okay, so I'll just move it.
Okay, staff recommendations being moved on item 29, parking changes on Erskine.
This is
Avenue
related to the John Fisher Public
Keep waiting.
School issue.
All those in favor?
Now you run,
In favor?
run and hide.
Opposed? That is carried. Item number 30, speed limit reduction on Keewatin Avenue. Councillor Robinson?
So again, I believe I have a motion on that. Is it just move it? Just move my, okay, so same thing. I'll just move my,
the staff recommendations.
No, it's just a
No, it's
memo
my-
directly from the councillor.
reduce the speed limit on Keewatin. It's related to John Fisher as well, but they asked me to separate them out. So I will move that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the speed reduction is moved on Keewatin Avenue. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 31. I'm going to defer this. This is Councillor Ajameri. Unless someone else has received some kind of direction on this item, in abundance of caution, I would move deferral so that she is in attendance when this item comes up for debate. Oh yeah? I'd be happy to move it on her behalf if word is that she is supportive.
Yes, I believe that she is okay with it. I don't have it in writing, but she did message another counselor who came to see me yesterday to say just move her item.
All right, well, let's move item 31 on behalf of Councillor Ajameri. Certainly If she wants to reopen it next time, she is more than welcome to do so. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 32, appointments to Business Improvement Area Boards of Management. There's numerous councillors involved here: Perusa, Councillor Cole, Councillor Carmichael Greb, Councillor Robinson. Any one of you, I guess, is more than welcome to move this item.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Robinson. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We have 3 new items that we'll add at this point. There's a memo from Councillor Cole regarding pedestrian safety at Dufferin and Glengrove.
This is just being introduced.
These are new items. All those in favor of adding it to the agenda? That's carried. 2 from my office, 2450, regarding safety plan strategy for intersection of Bombay-Bideford Avenue Road. I will move that. Add it to the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And one last item, also from my office, regarding reopening of item 2116, parking prohibition, Coneflower Crescent. All those in favor? That is added to the agenda. Hopefully no more items. We're a little late, but we could certainly go to the 9:45 timed item. This is for a final report, Common Elements Condominium Application and Part Lot Control Exemption, 2995 Keel Street, blocks B1, B2, B3, B4, Stanley Green District. And the councillor's not here. Oh, we do have a deputant? Sean McGaffey? Yes. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Sean McGaffey from WND Associates on behalf of the applicant, and I'm just here to say that we agree with the staff recommendations and conditions, and be here happy to answer any questions.
Well, I can't criticize you for droning on. Was that it? Yeah. Are there any questions for the deputant? No? Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for staff? All right, well, let's, no questions for staff. Let's move the recommendations then. She's okay with that? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 2 is also 9:45. This is Councillor Robinson. Final report, Common Elements Condominium Application and Part Lot Control Exemption Applications.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
103, 105, 108 Bayview Ridge.
That's correct. I'd like to move staff recommendations.
Okay, staff recommendations moved. Any questions for staff? Any speakers?
No.
No speakers? The recommendations are moved. That's on item 2. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Item 3, it is exactly 10 o'clock, so we can proceed with item 3. Request for directions report, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications. Do I have to read all these street addresses? Councillor Fillion? Item 3. timed item for 10 a.m.?
Yes, I'll move the,
Staff recommendations moved. Any questions for staff? Any speakers? No speakers? Staff recommendations on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The next timed item is 10:15, isn't it? Do I have to wait? I have to wait? What do I do? The next time item is not for another 15 minutes. We can deal with the additional items.
Yeah.
The first one was Councillor Cole.
Yeah, if I can move that recommendation, it's for a report request to look at a crossing on Dufferin.
Does everyone have item number 49?
Just has staff reporting back here.
Just asking for a staff report. All those in favor? Are there any questions for staff? Any speakers? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I guess I'll work on my item 50. We can dispose of that. That also is really asking for a staff report back. The intersection of Bombay, Bideford Avenue and Avenue Road is a very complicated intersection because it is often on-ramps to the 401 from residential streets, which is a little unusual, creating a very hazardous traffic situation. We're looking for advice from our good transportation staff on how we can reduce the chances of any collisions or pedestrian fatalities at that intersection. So we're just asking for a report back. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And this was the reopening of item number 21. This is item number 51. Originally, it was item number 16, parking prohibition on Coneflower Crescent. Now, it's my understanding that when this development was built, many residents weren't aware of the restricted covenants on parking ability in the area. And what's happened is when the no parking signs went up in the early part of the summer, last spring, many of the owners were shocked that they couldn't park on the street, or their visitors and guests could not park on the street. So we want to amend that slightly so that there's a little more leniency, so that when grandchildren and friends and family come over, they won't be ticketed. So I need a motion to reopen, and then the recommendations are on the page in front of you. Yes, a motion to reopen.
I'll reopen it and hold it so we can read it.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, so it's been reopened, but it's being held by Councillor Carroll. So we'll hold it down. Maybe she wants to talk to transportation staff or planning or whatever. I'm looking for something to do for the next 10 minutes. We can go to item 9, and I understand we have a deputant here. Douglas, is Douglas Hart here?
Sir.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, sir.
Would you please come to the microphone? You have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to thank the counselor and the council for inviting me here. I sent the counselor's assistant and Celeste a copy of my presentation. Do the councilors have it? Because I can move to an executive summary then. This is about an all-way stop on Rockford Road. Okay, I'll assume you don't have it. So my name is Douglas Hart. I live at 82 Rockford Road. I moved there in December 2004. We've had a major accident in front of our house. I was a policy analyst with the government, Northwest Territories. I'm also a member of Canadian Forces. I represent 3 families' interests, neighbors of mine, and the councillor asked me to make a short presentation. I'll orient you to the problem at hand. Where's Rockford Road? Steeles is to the north. Bathurst is to the east. Rockford Road, Sunnycrest, and Torresdale are in the middle. What is the problem? Threefold. There's excessive traffic. There's been a traffic analysis that was released 15 June 2015. There's excessive speeds, and that's a Rockford Road and Fisherville Road North Community Council background notes, where 15% of the traffic is in excess of 50 kilometers an hour on our street. And anecdotal information, there's no traffic enforcement by 32 Division on our street, to the best of my knowledge since I've been there, other than at my request. The timeline of this issue is I request all-way traffic control at 2 intersections on Rockford Road. That's at the north and the south ends of Sunnycrest. There was a review of the all-way stop control on Rockford Road and Sunnycrest done on the 15th of June, and I'll revisit that in a moment. Both requests were denied. There was a speed reduction, but Councillor Pasternak intervened. It was lowered from 50 kilometers an hour on a small residential street with large families from 50 to 40, and I'm making a presentation today. So review of the all-way stop control on Rockford Road and Sunnycrest Road. This is done by Transportation Services Division, North York District, and was completed 15 June 2015. The warrant for the installation of all-way stop control consists of 4 components: collision history, total vehicle volume, combined vehicle and pedestrian volumes crossing the major road, and the percentage of traffic on the major road. This is a review conclusion from Mr. Sean Dillon, who was the manager. I don't see you can see that. So we do not meet the collision history. We need 6 over 3 years. Number 2, total vehicle volume in excess. Number 3, combined vehicle and pedestrian volume. We don't meet it, and I'll analyze that in a moment. And number 4, percentage of traffic on the main road. Again, we do not meet that. So in order for the overall warrant to be warranted, either warrant A must be met or warrant B1 or B2 combined with warrant B3. The results of the review determined that the all-way stop control is not justified at either intersection. Review analysis, this is done by myself. 1, we already know there's excessive traffic on this small road. Number 2, traffic monitoring was not done in front of the school zone. It was done north of the Sunnycrest and Rockford Road area. There's no other road traffic available. Rockford Road is the only artery between Bathurst and Steeles. Therefore, there is no other road to bring traffic. So this criteria, in my mind, is not warranted. And number 4, we already know there's excessive traffic on this road. Further analysis. What I decided to do was look at what the city has done to do traffic calming in areas close to my area. Torresdale is directly to the east. It's approximately the same length. Again, it's bounded by Steeles on the north and Bathurst on the east. Here's the analysis, and this is the important part. Comparison between Rockford Road and Torresdale. A length 600 meters for Torresdale, Rockford 650 meters. The community on Torresdale is high-rise, condos, and single-family dwellings. Rockford Road, all single-family dwellings, immigrant families, large numbers of children. Stop signs on Torresdale, 3, 1 on Rockford. Speed bumps on Torresdale, 3, 0 on Rockford Road. School zone on Torresdale, 0, 1 on Rockford Road. Crossing guards on Torresdale, 1, 0 on Rockford Road. Traffic calming area, which consists of, it's illegal to turn south
You
on
could,
towards.
sorry, we've exceeded 5 minutes. If you could just wrap up, although
All right, sir.
I'd be willing to sit all afternoon and listen.
Bottom
My
line-
colleagues are on my
Bottom
case.
line is Rockford Road and Torresdale are similar. Traffic is like water. Traffic finds the easiest way. They do not go down Torresdale, they come down Rockford Road at excessive speeds and in excessive amounts of traffic. Again, thank you, sir, for the opportunity to present.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Councillor Burnside.
Thank you. Through you, I have about 4 questions. Do you think the change in the speed limit, I think you said from 50 to 40, has had any impact on driver speeds?
Short answer is no, sir. I don't have anything but anecdotal information. Traffic analysis says that 85% of the traffic obeys posted speed limits, so 15% would be in excess of 40K.
Okay, thanks. And the purpose of this stop sign is?
To break Torresdale, which is over 600, to break Rockford Road, which is 650 meters of uninterrupted road, into 2 sections.
So is it to, I understand that, sorry, I do understand that part. Is it to reduce speed, or because you're concerned about collision history, or a combination?
All the above, sir.
So part of it is to reduce speed. Okay. Collision history, I understand there's been 1 collision in 3
In
years?
front of my house, sir.
Okay. And would you be able to provide any information about how many collisions there have been in the last 5 years?
I'd have to talk to the city. I've just got statistics from the traffic analysis report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnside. Any other questions for the deputant? No?
Thank you, sir. Thank
Great.
you,
Thank you
council, for
very
the
much.
opportunity to present.
I'm going to be moving a motion to approve the installation. Questions of staff? Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. So I have questions of staff about the recommendations not to approve. I understand, because there is a one-way stop here already, and that is the usual pattern, where it's a crescent going on to a local artery. Generally, it's a one-way stop. You have the crescent traffic stop and check before they enter the local artery. But I'm wondering if staff want to comment on the distance from Fisherville Road and Torresdale. It is a long, rather attractive, curvy road. Is there a real detriment to putting an all-way stop here, or is it just a matter of staff had to recommend according to the warrants? Is there a real danger in going with the councillor and the community recommendations?
No, Councillor, there is no great danger from this singular installation. Our concern is it doesn't meet the criteria. There were very low side street volumes.
Right.
It wasn't close to being met. And the second part was it's more of a systemic concern that unjustified stop signs of proliferation generally can lead to motorist disobedience. So that is our concern.
Right. And that's why the warrants are in place, because you want to
Right.
avert that.
We would like to have stop signs where there is a genuine danger of side street traffic, where there's low volumes and motorists are become accustomed to there not being any side street traffic. It could lead to disobedience, rolling stops.
And do we have any information about the collision, the one collision in 6 years? Do we have any information about it? Do we know if it's something that the, where the one-way stop at this intersection played a role? Somebody disobeyed the stop sign at that point and charged into the road? Do we have any information?
I don't have the specifics, Councillor, but our analysis did show that it was potentially preventable by always stop, which would generally mean that it was an angle-type collision, that motorists were entering the intersection on conflicting movements that would not occur had there been an always stop sign control in place.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Robinson? Councillor Menawong?
That's correct, Counselor.
So if there's no issues with regard to cars crossing at the intersection, then we shouldn't put in a stop sign, is that correct? And plus, no pedestrians, there's not a lot of pedestrian conflict. Those would be two reasons. Two things don't exist. That would be the reason why you put in a stop sign. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, Counselor. Generally speaking, stop signs are intended to govern right-of-way conflicts and not as a speed control.
And the third thing is, we don't put in stop signs to slow down speed, do we? That's not why we put them in.
No, that's in accordance with the Ontario Traffic Manual, which does say that they're not intended for speed control.
So residents who are under a misapprehension when they want to put in a stop sign to slow down traffic, is that fair to say, from a transportation engineering point of view?
Yes, generally, Counselor, our preference is for physical traffic calming measures
That
like
is
speed
not
humps.
the proper tool that you use to slow down traffic.
Generally speaking, no, it's not.
Thank you.
Councillor Robinson?
Thank you. I want to understand because my understanding is when they're unwarranted, these stop signs, they can increase rear-end collisions. Is that actually accurate in this case? Or because of the configuration of the roads, it's not applicable?
There's the potential, but it is not something I can numerically quantify.
Okay. And just playing on, just taking off from something you said earlier, do you feel that it potentially could create a false sense of safety?
Thank you.
That if people aren't stopping, so we call them rolling stops in my ward, I think probably a lot of us experience this. Kids crossing the streets think that the cars are going to stop at a stop sign, but if it's unwarranted and not psychologically supposed to be placed there, it could create a false sense of security or safety.
Potentially. I wouldn't hazard a guess as to what, that percentage might be, but potentially.
But pedestrians expect vehicles to stop at a stop sign, correct? That's
Yes,
an
that is
assumption.
the expectation. And we would use, if should always stop be implemented, we would use every means possible to delineate the pedestrian crossing area, crossing lines, stop bars.
Right, so if it's not warranted, what it could be the potential outcome? If pedestrians expect it to be the driver to stop, and the driver's hitting many stop signs that are unwarranted, or there's a lot in the area, and they're rolling stops, what could be the outcome, I guess, of that scenario?
It is a potential hazard. How much? I would say minimal. There are many unwarranted stop signs around the city.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Burnside?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe there's been one accident there in 3 years, correct? At that intersection?
That's correct,
Do
Councilor.
we have any data in regards to the last 5 years?
Not off the top of my head,
Off the top
Councilor.
of your head, okay. Would it be unusual to have one accident in 3 years at an intersection controlled by all-way stops?
No, I would
Thank you.
say that would not be unusual.
Thank you, Councillor Burnside. Just one question that I have. When we approve warranted stop signs, are there any future collisions that occur at stop all-way controls that were originally warranted?
It's difficult to generalize, but generally, yes, there is a reduction in the right-of-way collisions. That's what the stop signs are intended to.
The collisions occur at warranted stop signs, unwarranted stop signs. Collisions occur because human beings are behind the wheel.
That's correct. That's the one factor that's beyond our control.
Thank you very much. Speakers, Councillor Menawong, Councillor Carroll.
For a whole number of reasons. Firstly, the warrants aren't met, number one. And secondly, I mean, a number of councillors asked questions regard to this about when you put in stop signs, the problems that will occur and the safety risks that may result. I don't like putting in stop signs. Stop signs are meant to regulate vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic. They're not, it seems to me, the deputant was talking about slowing down traffic, or at least using stop signs to send traffic other places, and that's not why we put in stop signs. And finally, and this is always the case, we have to have some regard to the warrant system, because if we start allowing stop signs in where they're not warranted without exceptional reasons, then our residents and my residents from my community are going to want me to put in stop signs where they're not warranted, and I won't have any good reason why not to tell them yes, except. So we've got to have rules and we've got to follow them, and I think in this case, we should support the staff position.
Councillor Carroll?
Yeah, I generally do agree with the deputy mayor. But I'm actually going to change it because of my familiarity with this area, and I love to give Councillor Pasternak a hard time too. But I am actually inclined to support the councillor in this case. The reason I ask questions is I'm always nervous when we sort of veer from the formula that the warrant sort of drives us to, which is that the Crescent residents should stop before they enter the local artery. But I know that Rockford looks like it's a in the map that we're provided with, it looks like it's a residential road leading from a residential road. The thing is, Fisherville has become a very busy road. You'll go, Fisherville, what's that? If you're not familiar with the area, you don't know that, in fact, it's a darned attractive shortcut. And if you're trying to get further down Bathurst, Fisherville and Rockford, the combination is a darned attractive shortcut. And we're often not able to see that by the maps that were provided in the agenda. For expediency, they use the most simple line drawings. We also don't see the school in the drawing that were provided in the agenda. And I'm forever saying, we have computers. I'm sitting here with two of them. So now I see the school. Now I see how close Steeles is. Now I see how straight Fisherville is. And the whole picture is there for me. And now I understand why the councillor is in a tight spot wanting us to exceed the warrants. And I long for the day when we have that technology right here in front of us for every item, and not because we brought it along, but because it's built into our decision making. Because when I'm looking at the whole picture with two screens, I see where the pressure is coming from. Well, it's only one accident. It is an area where if we really want to direct people to use the arteries and not the smaller residential streets, we put the school on a smaller residential street, hoping to put it in a safe area, and now the street is becoming more of an expressway than a residential street. So I'm going to support the councillor's request that we do approve the stop sign in this case. Not that I won't give you a hard time later in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other speakers? I'm just going to make a couple of comments, and then we'll put it to a vote. Councillor Carroll, thank you for pointing out that these maps really should show where schools are, and we have a very busy school on Rockford, Rockford Public School, which I've been to many times before, which I represented as a school board trustee, where many of the parents there, they do walk. There is a risk of enormous cut-through traffic from Bathurst Street. You can see it on the map before you. Those cutting across Rockford or across Fisherville creates an intensity of traffic that puts additional risk on the students and parents trying to get their kids to and from Rockford Public School. At the same time, I realize that sometimes someone will argue that putting in a stop sign where it's not warranted creates greater risk, but the reality is that collisions occur everywhere. They occur at stoplights that were warranted. They occur at stop signs that were warranted and approved by this body. Collisions occur everywhere that human beings are behind the wheel because accidents occur. And it's not our decisions that are driving accidents. It's people behind the wheel in our increasingly congested city. So I'm going to move a motion to approve the stop sign there. And it's important to realize that we put the stop sign in there before more collisions occur, before more people are injured or killed. And we had a very passionate deputant here who knows anecdotally how busy that street can be. And I'm always quite astounded when I drive through that neighborhood and see the volumes of traffic cutting off of Bathurst Street and trying to get towards Steeles or towards Allen Road. So I'll move if staff could put it on the screen, but I'm going to move the installation of the all-way stop control at Rockford Road and Sunnycrest. It was advocated by the local residents, supported by the local residents, and of course, we had a very articulate speech here today to support it. All those in favor? The motion on the screen. Yes. All those opposed? I believe it carried, 4-3. And I thank Councilor Peruzza for going to the washroom. Okay, we have another held item. I believe it's item 50. Oh, it is 10:28. So we can move to item 4. Final report zoning bylaw amendment application, rental housing demolition application. Councillor Carmichael Grab.
I have a motion.
I don't see deputants listed here. Is there anyone here to depute on this item? And have you registered with the clerk? I don't see any deputants here. Okay, so questions for staff, or what would you like to do, Councillor Carmichael Graham?
Just go ahead. I have a motion.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Item 4. Local councillors moving a motion.
Is that recommendation 3.4, requiring a complete site plan control application to the satisfaction of the Director, Community Planning, North York District, before introducing the necessary bills to City Council, be deleted. And this is agreed upon with planning staff.
Well, I don't know what the consequences of this are. Does anyone want, let's bring staff to the floor just to answer a couple of questions. Councillor Carroll, do you want to lead off?
I'm wondering if staff could tell, this is a very, a stringent usual condition. So my question is, why would we be in favor of bending the rule in this particular case?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at the time the report was written, there were some outstanding site plan issues. In particular, the south elevation of the podium had no windows, and the screening along the east side at the loading area had no screening. Subsequent to the writing of the report and that condition, the applicant met with planning staff to address those issues and showed staff some revised plans which address those issues. They added glazing to the south elevation, and they added a screening wall at the loading area. So subsequently, we are now satisfied with the measures, mitigating measures that they're introducing that will be secured in a subsequent site plan application. Therefore, there's no need to withhold the bills.
So it's far enough along that we will have that site plan control application done and dusted in a time frame you're satisfied with?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Fillion?
If we introduce the bills and are subsequently unhappy with the site plan, what's the remedy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the site plan's a separate process and a separate application, so therefore we have the ability to either refuse the site plan or not proceed with approval until we're satisfied with the site plan. And
Right.
also the councillor has the bump up option for report.
But they would already have their bills.
Correct, they would already have their bills, but they wouldn't have their site plan approval.
Which prevents what?
Prevents them.
How do we, at that point, get how do we then do we not lose our leverage or lose some leverage in getting the site plan we want if they get their bills first?
No, we don't lose leverage because the expectation is that they will abide by the plans that they've shown us in their subsequent site plan application, and we're going to hold them to that requirement.
And what if our expectation proves to be incorrect?
That risk is possible with any site plan application or any applicant, and as I said earlier, we have the ability not to approve the site plan.
So why would we give anybody their bills before we have the site plan?
We do it in probably 99% of all applications that we deal with.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Any speakers? No. All right, the motion is on the screen. It's before us. All those in favor? Opposed? I just saw, that's one opposed? Is that a yes? That's carried. We can now go to item 33, residential demolition application 378 Courtly Boulevard. Councillor Carmichael Graham.
I am moving recommendation number 3 of the staff report.
Okay, recommendation number 3 is before us. Any questions for staff? Councillor Carroll?
Same question. I'm wondering if, here we are, we're moving the choice number 3. And are all the conditions met here? Do we have everything in place for what will be going on to this dwelling? Onto this lot, I should say.
Sorry to digress slightly. Apparently there is a speaker for this item, so just going to vary the procedure slightly to go backwards. Is Sabrina Rotenberg here? Great, my apologies. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
To answer that question, I just wanted to explain that this lot will remain vacant because it is, I'm just going to show a little diagram. The owners of 467 Lytton, which you can see there, purchased the property at 378. All the properties to the east on Lytton extend right down to Courtly. The property at 378 Courtly is the last one in a series of houses from Bathurst to that point. And therefore, they would just like to add that portion and restore it to its ravine condition. so that their lot now incorporates this property as well.
You're done?
That's basically.
Any
the
questions for the deputant? No? Okay, we can go back. Were there questions for staff? Yeah, Councillor Carroll. Thank you very much for deputing.
Yeah, so I wonder about, I looked at this one on Street View earlier, and you have the park across the street, and this is that funny little jog in Courtly where it looks like you're sort of, you know, changing keys and moving to a new street. It's a little jog in the terrain. So is the fence that's being asked for, is the typical fence that we would require for a backyard fence? Do these recommendations cover things like easement and how it looks compared to the other houses that are fronting onto Courtly? Has all of that been taken into account in the recommendations that we would be approving?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in preparing the report, looking at the type of fence that will be erected on the property line is not part of our jurisdiction. It would be through municipal licensing and standards. So what we're asking for is that if there's any demolition, that during the demolition, there is the appropriate fencing.
Oh, so this part A of 3 is just what you want there during the demolition. The decisions about how this is going to look to Courtly Boulevard comes in another process.
It would come in another process should they decide to erect a fence that doesn't meet the requirements of Chapter 363.
So, and now I'm not sure which staff would answer this, but it's a process question. So in a case like this, another structure is not going to be erected, but we're essentially making a backyard next door to front yards. So we're demolishing and giving approval to do that today. How do we ensure that we're not going to end up in World War III about a fence being too close to sidewalks for snow removal, too tall, horizontal, which is the new fad in pool fences or things like that? How do we ensure that if we approve the demolition today and we haven't seen what will be erected there?
Toronto Building doesn't have the jurisdiction over that. I believe that they can erect a fence in accordance with the regulations at the proper distances, and should they not do that, then they would need a report through this community council for a fence exemption.
Right. So who does answer that question about process? Usually if we're demolishing, we're worried about whether or not we have an application for a building because another building will replace it. In this case, we're turning it a lot that used to be a building with a front yard into the backyard of the property on the back street. So the question I'm asking is a question of order and process. We don't know what they'll march in for. So this is a different situation. We're approving the demolition without knowing what really the street is going to look like.
Well, through you again, Mr. Chair, the owners of the property has said that the property will be landscaped and fenced and maintained as the rest of 467 Lytton is currently.
But we don't have that application yet. Okay. Okay, those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for staff? Item 33, option 3 has been moved. Speakers? No? You're good? Yeah? Speakers? No? Okay. The item before us is option number 3. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 34, timed item for 10:30. Councillor Perusa, I understand you have an amendment.
I do, Mr. Chair. I believe the clerk has the motion. I'd like to move that the laneway up at York that's being created that will service the back part of the new subway station be named Howard Moscow Way. It's, I believe the name has been circulated to all the departments. The report says it's not a problem. It fits within the city's naming policy. It's consistent with the city's naming policy, and I think it would be a big honor for someone who was a big advocate of both the TTC and York.
Well, okay. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if there's anybody here from the public who because I know it's a tight item, it's a deputation item. I don't know if there's anybody here. I think we should check to see first, just in case.
I don't have anyone on the list. Oh, there is. Have you registered with the clerk? Well, we can hear you. Yes.
I have an aerial photograph if I could put it on the projector.
So can I then speak after he speaks? Because we should have done that first.
Absolutely.
Mr. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So excuse me all, I wasn't sure of what the protocol actually is. So this is our Pioneer Village station.
Could you just introduce yourself to give some
sorry,
context?
My name is Ronan Alwell. I'm with TYSSE, TTC, that's the Spadina Subway Extension Project. So I'm with the third-party division. So this is the new Pioneer Village station on the south side of Steeles. There's an entrance building on the north side of Steeles that you don't see, but on the south side, which obviously is within City of Toronto jurisdiction, we have an entrance building to the left of the photograph with a bus terminal further to the south. Now, what you don't see, the aerial photograph is an older photograph. What you don't see fully, but what you see formed, is the new public streets. So we refer to them as Track and Field Road on the right-hand side of the photograph, and East-West Link Road on the bottom of the photograph. So those new streets, well, it really is one street. It's a backward L-shaped street. They provide for bus circulation in and around the bus terminal. So Councillor Peruzza is suggesting that this new street be named Howard Moscow Lane. TTC has no opinion on the matter. But from our perspective, we do need a name. We need a name straight away because in order to get occupancy for the station, we need a municipal address for the bus terminal. So without having a municipal address for the bus terminal, we cannot submit our occupancy documentation to City Building. As many of you are well aware, the subway system will be opening up in December of this year. So this is urgent for TYSSE.
I have a question for the deputants. Just want to make it clear, are you an employee of a third-party subcontractor to the TTC?
I'm a consultant working on TYSSE, but I represent the TYSSE project, yes. So I'm Deputy Director of the third-party department.
And are you here as a private citizen? Or?
No, I'm here representing TYSSE.
Don't you think you should have been sort of seated with our staff as...
My apologies. As I said, I didn't realize I'd be speaking, and I wasn't aware of protocol. My apologies.
Right. Last question. The motion is Howard Moscow Way, but you said Howard Moscow Lane.
Sorry, Howard Moscow Way.
Okay.
My apologies.
Any other questions?
Yeah, that's the name that's been circulated to all the departments.
Yeah, I just
meets the policy.
I mean, maybe it was just a
And
slip.
I should also add that York University had proposed Lions Way, named after their sports team.
All right. Any other questions for the deputant? No?
I have questions for staff.
Questions for staff is fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For coming in. Questions for staff? Councillor Cole?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. While I don't support this policy, is it not a city policy that we have to wait till someone has passed away 2 years before honoring them in this way?
We just changed it. It meets the policy, Judge.
So, sorry, if maybe staff
Sorry.
could answer me.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I just want to hear a staff answer.
Yeah, let's hear from staff.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. My name's Kerry Ferguson. I'm staff. I work with the Engineering and Construction Services Division. No, the policy allows namings after living persons.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've seen numerous parkettes named after people who I have seen recently, so they're quite alive.
But we changed the policy because of that.
So let's go to staff again.
Yeah, so I understand that council in the last year,
2015 was
well,
the last
I thought
amendment
it
to
was
the
more
policy.
recent than that council, I thought it was just in the last year, that we moved a motion, because there's been some issues with naming certain names and individuals. So my understanding is there's a shift to the policy that the person had to be deceased.
No, no. Prior policies or policy, the person had to be deceased. In 2015, we amended the policy and we allowed for living persons to be named.
That's exact opposite.
The
of
only,
what I
the only
thought.
prohibition, and it may sound unusual, the only prohibition there's now in the policy today is for recently deceased. So living persons are okay, and persons deceased more than 2 years are okay. But there is a restriction in there on naming something after someone recently deceased.
And that is because,
I assume it's to allow for a cooling off period or a,
but I know there was a laneway named after somebody who just passed away within the last year, this summer. So,
street names shall not make a direct or indirect reference to recent events or recently deceased individuals, except where the event or the individuals had a legacy of significant contributions to the city of Toronto. Names of recently deceased individuals may be considered after 2 years. So the policy is intended to say, as a rule, the person must be deceased for 2 years, but if there's evidence put forth that the person had significant contributions to the city of Toronto, allowances would be made or considered.
so why wouldn't allowances just be made generally? Why is there that condition in place?
Because we have some applications where, excuse me, some people apply for namings immediately after someone passes away, and it's sometimes thought to be a reactionary application and not, it's a cooling off period. It's a time for people to think about things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Any other questions? No? Speakers list? So Councillor Minawong, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Fillion.
So my motion is still on the floor, right,
Your
Mr. Chairman?
motion's still on the
Okay.
floor, and you can wrap up the
Sure.
speakers list.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Burnside.
So I'm going to move the staff recommendations that it be called Lions Way, because that's the York University preference. I think, well, it makes sense for so many ways. I mean, this is near York University, it's a York University property. If we're going to rename something and we're going to call it something else, I think we have an obligation to talk to the university about it and see what they would like it to be named. So that's number one. Number two, you know, if we were to name it Howard Moscow Way, there'd have to be a no right turn into it, and I don't know that would make the street very functional.
That's very cute.
And so, but I do see it does look on the face of it that actually doesn't go anyplace, so maybe that would be the argument in favor of Howard Moscow Way. I like Howard, I do, I thought he was a good counselor, but I do believe, seriously, that Lions Way is appropriate, and that, you know, we don't even know if I don't even know where Councillor Moscow went to school. It should be associated with York University. I think that's our obligation as this committee, is to, you know, defer to something in the area. So there you are.
Thank you, Councillor Minnan-Wong. I have Councillor Robinson, Fillion, and Burnside, and Peruse on the list. Oh, sorry, Carroll. Councillor Carroll?
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with the deputy mayor on this. Yes, this is a subway going to York University. It ended up being a subway going to Vaughan. But the vision that started decades before, that we should stop running 1,500 buses to York University a day and have mass rapid transit going to York University and make it the institution that it now is 100% the vision, both from Metro days and post-amalgamation as chair. It is 100% the work of Councillor Moscow. I heartily welcome this, and I think that upon further reflection, if you asked every past president or chair emeritus of every board that was at York back in those days, that you would find they had no problem with it either, because they worked so extensively with them to get to this point. This was decades and decades and decades of one person, first of all with temerity, and eventually with just dogged persistence, getting to the point where we would do this. And I will never forget, one of the high points of my municipal political career, no matter how long or short it lasts, will always be riding a bus up to that location to announce that we had put together the tri-government funding in a bus with Paul Martin and Howard Moscow and Mayor David Miller at the time, but heaven knows he went through several Metro chairs and mayors before he was in that bus with those politicians of that day. But it was that man on that bus, and everyone knew it, that was making it happen. And I will never forget the satisfied smile on his face, that he had pulled all the governments together to understanding that we need to do it, and that when we did decide to do it in the council chamber, as polarized as we sometimes get, particularly over transit, there was, by that time, because of the way he affected that decision, there was no polarization. There were a few members in opposition, but everyone knew that this was a no-brainer. And 30 years of work got us there, and it was his work. And those are the rare occasions when you do name something after a politician, the rare occasions. Those are the rare, that kind of providence is when you vary your hesitation to say, oh, we're going to name things after each other. This is when you vary that hesitancy that you have in your core. We all have it. But this is when you draw the line and say, no, this is deserved. And so I thank Councillor Peruse for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Robinson?
I don't have a lot to add. I feel like this came out of the blue. There's a lot of past councillors that are very deserving of recognition, and so how are we addressing that? I guess also I'm not convinced that is the policy. My understanding was that the individual had to be deceased for a period of time. Staff are saying otherwise. I'm looking into it right now, but I distinctly remember something going to council recently to alter that because of problematic issues in the past. So I'm not comfortable with it today because I want to do more research on this, and I want to understand how do we then recognize all the councillors who've made significant contributions to our city and to our communities and neighborhoods for various reasons. And so I'd just like this to be a bit more streamlined and systematic on how we're tackling this.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Fillion, and then Councillor Burnside.
Thank you. I think Councillor Carroll said it very well. I mean, those of us who served on council with Howard Moscow will remember it well because it was a very memorable experience. He really was a one-of-a-kind, larger-than-life, long-serving member of council. Not that we need to make an exception because the policy does allow this, but even if you did need to make an exception, Howard's the kind of guy you would make an exception for. And there is a direct connection to this location because it is leading into a subway stop, which, as Councillor Carroll said, might not be existing if not for his perseverance. Whether you agreed with what Howard said or not, or whether you sometimes did and sometimes didn't, he really had a remarkable ability to even get people who were on, totally opposed to him ideologically, voting his way and to make things happen. He was really, an exceptional counselor, and I'm assuming, Councillor Prutz, that Councillor Moscow was okay with having this named after him. I actually, think it's very appropriate. I would have preferred to actually see a larger street named after Councillor Moscow, but I think this is probably, because it's leading into that subway station, probably the appropriate location.
Thank you, Councillor Fillion. Councillor Burnside.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can sit and argue back and forth about the whether someone else may have figured out that we need a subway going to a location where there are 1,500 buses. I think somebody probably would have, but that to me isn't really the issue. It's our job to figure those things out, and we're paid to figure those things out. And I will always vote against the naming of parks or roads or anything else after politicians who are still alive. Whether it's perceived or actual aggrandizement of each other is something we need to avoid. To me, these precious few namings should actually be named after community people who are changing our city and are not getting paid for it. It's a very straightforward proposition to me. Howard Moscow may have done a great job. I'm not even disputing that. I just think it's totally improper for us to name it after a living city politician.
Okay. Councillor Perusa. Any other speakers? Councillor Cole?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure the mover of the motion can speak last. I'm a bit torn on this one, and I'll just explain why. Is in part, I mean, I think Howard Moscow deserves recognition. Part of me thinks it should be in the ward he represented for 30 years, which I now represent, where kind of, if you want to talk about legacy and an imprint he left, I could take you for a walk or a drive around that, Ward 15 and find many suitable places where he should and will be honored. And one of those will be coming soon where, because of a lot of his work and mine now, the Arc-en-Ciel, the very world-famous neon art installations going back into Yorkdale subway station later this year, which is really going to be a testament to him. And who knows, maybe there's a naming opportunity along with that once it goes back into operation. Just on the one issue, though, about our deliberation on this. So the TTC, as it was mentioned, needs this name. They need a municipal address for this new station that's finished, and we need to open up a subway line. So the one thing we can't do is defer this or beyond City Council. The other interesting thing to note is certainly with the naming of the street, Howard Moscow Way will be on all the signage in the station, exit at Howard Moscow Way for the thousands of university students. It'll also be on every single subway map throughout the system, because we have municipal addresses on every single one of the maps, on every subway and at every subway station. And so whether that might be a great thing, or for some, or for some on the other side of this issue, a terrible thing, but it's certainly a naming that goes well beyond the actual kind of street sign on that lane or way right by York University. And so again, I'm a bit torn, because again, to me, the more appropriate place to honor someone would be the area that he represented and where he, did a lot of work. But more than anything, we need a name so we can open up a subway in 100 days. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's 100 calendar days, not working days.
Councillor Perusa?
So this, I don't know if you can see this. So this is Steeles Avenue, okay? This is the new laneway that's being contemplated, that's being built. This is the main entrance to the campus, to York University right here, okay? So this was named back in 1958, 59, North Gate, because there was nothing in this area, and it was like the North Gate entrance to the university, right? And this is a very, very nice boulevard, actually. So this station has an entrance here. In this portion, this little portion, will front onto, or will open onto this new road that's being contemplated. There's a main entrance here coming in off North Gate, and there's a further station entrance on the north side of Steeles, which is in Vaughan. And I don't know what address that will have and what name that will have, or what name this new street C will have that runs into Vaughan. The north side of Steeles is Vaughan here, okay? So there's a few opportunities here, but Lions is just a name that basically popped out of the YUDC, because the TTC said, look, we need an address, we need it ASAP, so they said Lions. Because I talked to the folks at York, and one of the reasons why there isn't anybody here from York is that Lions, well, let me show you. So Lions, you got York Lions Stadium. That's the football stadium. Here you see, because this is Google, we just did this last minute, but there's stands, and at the top of the stands you have Lions Stadium, big Lions Stadium, visible from Steeles and everywhere else. Then you have the new Pan Am Track and Field Stadium down here, which is called York Lions Stadium. Now, it's my intention, not having thought about this earlier, but that this street, if York University would like to finally give it some character and a name, as opposed to the North Gate entrance, because that's what it's called, North Gate, because now it actually leads to something in some place. It leads to Lions Stadium. It leads to York Lions Stadium. It leads to the Tate McKenzie building, which is the physical fitness center for the university. Northgate, which has no address on it, would be a really good Lions Way, I would think, instead of Northgate entrance. But that's for the future. Really what we're talking about is this little laneway here. And we're talking about a guy, and I think Councillor Fillion said it better than I could ever say it. Howard was a big guy physically, but he was around for a long time, some 30 plus years. He basically, from being a North York City councillor, to a North York controller, to a Metro councillor, to a City of Toronto councillor, and those of you who actually knew Howard would know that Howard was a guy that never missed a thing on his agenda. He would read the agenda cover to cover. The smaller the print, the more he paid attention. The smaller the print, the longer he took to read it and to understand it. And I'm not sure there's any staff here still around when Howard was around, but if they were, then they would be able to tell you that at 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, their phone would be ringing. And Howard would be saying, listen, you put your name to this report and you said this in the little fine print. What does it mean? Because I really want to understand it. That's the kind of representative he was. He loved the to and fro of municipal government. He loved it. He loved representing people. And I suspect that if his health, overall health, had continued, he'd still be around doing exactly what he loved to do. So if someone like that, if we can't take a pause for one brief second and say, you know what? We should find a small way to honor that. And to honor that commitment
Councillor
to
Burke,
public
if you could,
service.
if you
So
could wrap up.
I'm happy to move it. He lives just down the street. He had a
I know, he's
huge
not-
hand at
he's
the,
not
on
the
the
Pope.
campus.
We've got
Yeah,
the
he's-
message, yeah. No, thank you
Right.
very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other speakers on this item?
So just a point of maybe order or clarification, does this, regardless of what we decide today, does this go to city council
It
for full
apparently
debate?
does not go to city council.
It's delegated. Should we send this to city council without recommendation?
I'm also surprised that the cost of this naming is $500 in the staff report, which it won't go past its delegated authority. Now, Councillor Cole, you could probably move. Could Councillor Cole not move a motion under our bylaws to take it from committee and put it up to council? So he'll get his 2/3. You can remove it. Not here. All right, well, I guess we have to vote on it. All those in favor? The amendment. Yes. The amendment is on the floor to change the staff recommendation of Lions Way to Howard Moscow Way. One, two, three, four, 5. Is that 6? 6 in favor. Those opposed? 3 opposed. It carries. Item 35, time for 10:30. We have a speaker, Shayla Dunlop from the South Armor Heights Residents Association. This is payment in lieu of parking, 1940, 1942 Avenue Road. Is Shayla Dunlop here?
Actually, I'm going to speak. Sheila Dunlop's there. My name's Bob Williams. I'm also on the list with the staff.
I don't see you on the list. Bob Williams?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. Today, we're talking about the payment in lieu of for 1940 and 1942 Avenue Road. Over the years, payment in lieu parking has been assessed against a number of commercial operations on the Upper Avenue. That's the stretch from Lawrence to Wilson. And what we've found in our area currently is that we actually have a parking deficit of almost 400 spaces. There are 915 spaces available and 1395 spaces actually required. So I think before you today, you've got a recommendation to only collect $15,000 for what is considered 3 parking spots, the additional parking spots. All of the staff reports have acknowledged that, and even today's item notes that there should be 14 parking spots. And what we want to ensure is that these parking spots are valued appropriately. And we've done some calculations here. There are currently three categories for assessing parking, and it's based on the size of the property. And right now, we're using 1912, 1914 as a reference point. It was assessed a couple of years ago. They needed 15 parking spots, and it worked out to almost $500,000. If we use a similar property valuation for 1940, you'd be looking at a value for the full 14 spaces is $465,000, depending on what the assessed value of the property is. So what we're arguing is that you're really giving away $400,000 basically by assessing it at $15,000. And while it may not be fair to assess them retroactively for the 11 missing spaces for the existing properties, the bylaw is clear about the requirements. But even if you look at just the 3 parking spots, the 3 parking spots were calculated as being for $5,000, and that's each. And that's based on the assumption that the addition is 220 odd square meters. So it's been plugged in as a category 2, which allows properties 200 to 400 square meters, $5,000 per parking spot. But the reality is that this is a 220 square meter addition to an existing 700 square meter building. So in my mind, that puts it firmly in category 3, which each one of these parking spots should be valued at close to $33,000 a piece, or minimally $100,000 for those 3 spots. I liken it similar to our income tax requirements. When you get an extra $100,000 in income, you're taxed at a marginal rate that progresses. You don't go back to the lowest tax rate. That's how the $15,000 has been calculated. So at this stage, I think those 3 parking spots have been grossly undervalued. And if it is truly only the 3 spots you're going after, I think you should consider the value of those 3 spots. The other argument that's being made is that there are parking lots in behind this property. There is a parking lot that has space for 92 cars, a second lot down the street which has another 132 or 32 spaces. So there's 124 parking spots in parking lots right now. But those parking lots serve multiple properties. I don't know how many, 50, 100, I don't know. And for each new development that comes in, they always argue, well, there's a parking lot there. There's no concerns. But they share that parking lot with every single property that is in that area. And at the very most, maybe the formula should give a credit. 5%, 10% of your parking can be picked up by the parking lot, but it shouldn't waive the value of the parking in lieu. And you might argue that there's no place to really invest that money. Well, we can invest that money in electric parking spots, spots for electric vehicles. There's none along Avenue Road. Is that the future for parking? Should we be thinking about that type of infrastructure? I don't think you should waive the infrastructure requirements for a property just because you think the existing infrastructure supports it. I think you always need to be looking forward in your infrastructure, whether it's for parking, for sewers, or even recreation center for all the new condo buildings that are being built. Your responsibility is to recognize and support the need for business and the supporting infrastructure. And in concluding, I think at the very least, we would ask that the city spend some time to interpret their formula and clarify it so that the formula can be applied fairly to all the businesses in the community. It's not just about our wanting more parking in the area. It's about treating all of the businesses equally and fairly along that way with a formula that's consistent for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a Marxist perspective on parking. Are there any questions for the deputant? No, we have some questions for staff. Thank you very much. Now, just to reconfirm, Shayla Dunlop will not be deputing. That's your, no? Okay, great. You're on the list, but that's fine. Questions for staff? Councillor Carmichael Greb.
I have a couple questions. The 2 or 3 renovations that were done just south of this building, how much cash in lieu were they charged? Not 1912, 1914, because that's a whole new development. That's completely separate. But the dentist office at, I think it's 1916, and then there was a paint store that also did a renovation. How much cash in lieu or payment in lieu were they charged? Anyone?
Sorry, we don't have that information handy right now.
There was no payment in lieu for those buildings, and they were doing similar and larger renovations. And how would you, on small businesses that are trying to stay in an area, is cash in lieu or payment in lieu something that helps business, or is it someone who wants to, increase their business? Is it good for business?
Yes, payment in lieu is an option. We want to try to encourage actually every application is different. So payment in lieu is an option that we can consider, providing there's council approval to provide a payment instead of parking for future parking development or improvement to parking in the area.
And do you look at how much street parking is available in the area? I mean, I know a lot of these developments and renovations say there's a green pea lot. There are actually 2 green pea lots in the area, and there's a lot of street parking. Do you look at the parking that's available on the side streets at all?
Yes, we will put in consideration of surrounding parking facilities and available parking as part of our consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Councillor Carroll?
Yes, so I'm wondering if staff would like to comment on the deputant's issue that for 14 spaces, we've set the rate kind of low. $15,000 is, at 14 spaces, that's a little over $1,000 a space. It's little less than the private school tuition of one doctor's child. It's a pretty low rate for payment in lieu for 14 spaces. Is this our usual precedent? Are we not following the rates that the deputant just shared with us?
You turn your mic on?
Sorry. Hello. I think the calculation is based on 3 parking spaces shortfall based on the type of development.
Okay, so now I'm confused, because in the body of the report, it talks, the parking exemption is considered appropriate since the actual shortfall of parking based on the proposed building expansion is 3 spaces. But in the recommendation, what it's acknowledging is that this is for a requirement of 14. And the recommendation is what people are going to historically speed through and look at going forward. So do we want to be making the statement that this payment in lieu is actually for 14 spaces right in the body of the recommendation? I mean, is it really, are we really losing 3 or are we really losing 14? Because years from now, the precedent will be based on the recommendation, which sets a new rate for payment in lieu of $1,000 a space, if I just read the recommendation.
I don't have that calculation in front of me. We can get back and double check that.
But we do need to make a decision today.
From what I understand, the calculation was based on the 3 parking space shortfall. So the way the workout is probably about $5,000 per space. Now, that's all the information I have in front of me today.
would we have anyone here who could speak to the site plan to explain to me why 14 is actually 3? Because we don't, today we don't have it with us. Is there someone here who remembers that?
I'm just asking staff to bring that information to me as to how many parking spaces are required and how many are provided.
Well, I think the deputy mayor makes a good suggestion. Could we hold it down so they could look at it? Because what I'm trying to understand is if we need to amend this recommendation. If it's really 3, then why are we putting a recommendation on the books that says 14 spaces and we've set the payment in lieu rate of 15,000 for 14 spaces? If the recommendation should actually say 3, it should say 3. Because I know that if I go looking for precedent, I'll scan through recommendations and say, oh, well, over there on Avenue Road, it was $1,000 a space. We're in essence, we leave the wording as it is. We're setting new rates and ignoring the concern. Yeah.
If we can-
We can hold this item down.
I suggest we do that, because we may need to reword the recommendation just to make sure we're not changing laws on the fly. Yeah.
Okay.
If 15,000 is what we're going with, and it's because it's 3 spaces, then I'd like the recommendation to say so.
I'm getting it.
Okay, we'll hold the item down and go to item 36 is a timed item for 10:45. Councillor Carmichael Greb, a refusal of a Boulevard Cafe permit application, 2572 Yonge Street.
Yes, I'm moving staff recommendations.
You're supporting the denial of the permit. Okay, that's before us. Staff recommendations are before us. We're on 36. Any other speakers? Questions to staff? Yeah, we stood down 35.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, so we've moved on to 36, a timed item for 10:45, which, so we're running a little bit behind here. Okay, so staff recommendations are on the floor. Any questions for staff, speakers? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 37, encroachment appeal 102 Rosewell Avenue. Councillor Carmichael Greb.
I'm moving staff recommendations.
Oh, apparently, oh. Sorry, forgive me, there's been a late register to speak. Sure, I'm gonna make a mess. Hovig Pillagen? Okay. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Hovig Pillagen, and I'm the owner of 102 Rosewell Avenue. After extensive renovations that we've done on the property, we just actually moved in last week. Part of that renovation has included landscaping on our property and on city property, which also includes planting of trees and an irrigation system. What we're here for today is to look at encroachment and a building of a fence that would help extend our backyard a little bit onto city property. We're right on the corner of Rosewell and Briar Hill, which is right where the intersection is. And this fence will help give us a little bit of safety for our 3 children playing in the backyard and some more breathing room in a tight neighborhood. So we're just here today to request approval for the encroachment of the fence. We have full intention of further landscaping and maintenance of the property, and the separation of the fence from the city sidewalk does continue to provide space for cleaning of the sidewalk, snow removal, and landscaping, and for public pedestrian traffic. So that's basically all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? No? Questions for staff? Speakers? What does the local council want to do? Move the recommendations?
Yes, move staff recommendation.
Okay, staff recommendations are before us. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 38, encroachment agreement, 18 Graydon Hall Drive. We do have 4 deputants for this item. Steve Daniels from Tridel. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
We'll keep it short. We're here to support city staff's recommendation in the report. We've got our engineers here if we have any questions, and also our lawyer. So we appreciate the time and effort that staff put in on this report for us. That's it.
That's it. Okay. Any questions for that moving address? No? Great. Thank you very much. Steve Mann of A1 Underhill and Associates.
Steve Mann is our consultant. So like I said, if we probably registered a number of people just in case we had to answer any questions.
Okay.
Okay.
So he won't be speaking? No. Lori Tennell of Delzato Zort? Same. And Don who? Project manager? Same. So none of these people will be speaking. Okay. Councillor Minnan-Wong?
Sure. I have questions of staff.
Questions of staff? Staff on the floor. Number 38.
Yes, so I have a couple of questions as it relates to informing future purchasers of the obligations that they may or may not be assuming. Well, the obligations that they may be assuming. So what things are taking place to inform future purchasers that they're assuming this obligation?
Directed to planning or transportation services? I guess
Whoever can,
I could respond on behalf.
Answer from anybody.
Sure, I'll respond on behalf of city planning. So the decision notice from today will be going to all the interested parties in addition to anyone who's corresponded in relation to the item before you today. And then as we spoke about yesterday, Councillor, I think once the encroachment agreement, depending on the decision made today, we could endeavor, because there's no current owners of the units, because the condo has not been registered, we can't actually do a mail out. So we may follow through on what we did twice previously this summer by sending a notice from your office hand delivered to the current occupants of the building.
You can't, so do you need a motion for that, or just?
No, I think we can do that as we've done with previous notifications.
Second thing is what about future purchasers? Like some guy who's 10 years from now, there's a let's say an encumbrance on their condominium, right?
Right. So what we've included in the conditions here, and what we're anticipating including in the conditions for the condo approval, should we proceed to that phase, is a note in the declaration regarding the entirety of the system and the parameters associated with it. So it's anticipated that that declaration, which will be registered on title, will form the basis of informing future purchasers. I think what we spoke about yesterday as well is an idea of requiring future agreements of purchase and sale to have such a notification, and I haven't yet been able to discuss with our legal staff, but I'm endeavoring to do so within the next few days.
So do I need to operationalize that as a motion, or?
If you wish, I don't think it's necessary, simply because we haven't yet finalized the draft condo conditions, so we can certainly do that in consultation with your office as we finalize those.
Okay, so I don't need to move that motion?
I don't think so, no.
Does the developer have any objection to that? Okay. So we can take them at their word. Okay, so I'll just, thank you, those are my questions. I'll just speak. Oh, I actually do have one other question. So when I got back from holidays, I got an email from one of the purchasers. And he's an engineer. And he was worried about what's happened and whether that, you know, the piercing of the aquifer and whether that destabilizes the condo at all, which I have no idea about. But I just read it last night when I got back yesterday as I was going through my mail that I hadn't read in a week. And I'm wondering whether, you know, this thing is a problem for the building.
So the
I'm asking as much for him as for me.
Yep. So the building, I think there's three things to recognize. Is the building, including the groundwater system, was designed by qualified engineers who are qualified to do that work. The Toronto building issued the permits and did through that in permitting process as well as the inspection process. We confirmed that the building meets all of the life safety requirements of the Ontario Building Code. And on top of that, the city engaged the services of a peer reviewer who are qualified engineers to actually review the design and systems to make sure there were no safety concerns with the building.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks. I'll just speak to this. So this is what happened at this.
Are you done with questions for staff?
I know, I'm happy. I don't know if I'm done.
Are there any other questions for staff?
I didn't think there
Councillors?
would be.
No?
No. I'll speak to it.
You'll speak to it? Sure.
Yeah, this is a very interesting application. So the developer bought this land, started developing, and in their construction, they pierced an aquifer. But and it was a huge amount of water that was coming out. Huge amount of water. And they were dumping, and it was going into the river. And it's been a struggle for the developer to register all the condominiums because we couldn't find a solution for it. So we've been trying to work on solutions for quite some time, and the residents have been kind of, they're really upset about this because they want to get their condos registered, and they can't do it because we need this encroachment agreement. So the city's been struggling. We've had, what, 7 lawyers on this? Is that right? 7 lawyers, tons of staff. And the big problem that we have is they're going to dump these swimming pools filled, the amount of water would fill swimming pools in a day. Like, it is a huge amount of water that's being dumped out. It's going into, it's being dumped into the river. The thing that we've been struggling with as a city is trying to come up with a solution that actually makes sense for us, that it's A, clean water, and B, it's not going to, there might be erosion issues involved. And so, and then they have to build a pumping station, and then they need an encroachment agreement because it's going over city property. So the city's been trying to work on a solution with the developer to find a solution that works for everybody, including, and that we have, the TRCA is involved, I think the Ministry of the Environment is involved. And then the thing that I'm concerned about is that whatever encroachment agreement that we have, that the city is not on the hook at any future date for whenever if the system were to break, fall apart, or need maintenance, repair, or replacement. So that's why you see in this agreement a voluminous amount of recommendations. Willie, how much is the LC?
I can answer that one over here. The LC is for the value of the replacement of the system itself.
Yeah. So I think we finally come up with something that is acceptable to staff, that protects the city, and that also protects the residents. And I have to ask questions because you have to protect future residents because they have to know what arrangements they're assuming. So it's been kind of a really messy file. Glad to see it come to conclusion, that the developer can move on and also the residents can finally get their condos, what they've been waiting for so long. So with that, I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Menawong, any other speakers to the item? Local councillors moving the recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 38 and 39, time item for 11:30, front yard parking appeal, 131 Cedric Avenue. We have 3 deputants. Sarah Diebel. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to attend here today. I'm the resident at 131 Cedric Avenue, and I come here today to ask that you exercise your discretion to grant this appeal. In looking to the recommendations of the manager of right-of-way transportation services, the reasons provided to the council for not approving the appeal are twofold. Namely, that permit parking is available on the street and that the property won't meet the soft landscaping requirements. I'll address these first, and then I'll go on to very briefly discuss or speak to the alternate recommendations. So regarding the recommendation to remove the existing gravel area and restore the area to soft landscaping, if you turn to the report provided to you and you look at the Appendix A, or the other diagrams that show the actual property, you'll see that the current surface is covered in a loose rock. There's an interlocking brick walkway and there's some gravel to the side. I've been the resident at this property now for 3 years. We purchased the property from a property developer who did all of this work, and we've made no changes to the property since taking residence, and we intend to make every effort to bring the property into compliance. Prior to the property appearing as it does now, my understanding from speaking from residents in the neighborhood who've been there in excess of 20 and 30 years, some of them, that the front parking pad was actually pavement and there was a legal park pad. You can see that the curb is cut consistent with this. So at no time in the living memory of this property has there been 100% landscaped surface on the front area. And in fact, the current area, as it stands and as it was redeveloped by the property developer, is in fact significantly more permeable than the former property. In looking to make changes to the property, we would propose to actually remove substantially everything that's there now, put down some soil so that the front parking area can in fact support vegetation, and to take up the challenge of making this property as green as possible while still respecting the policy intent of the city and of this council, namely to improve groundwater runoff and drainage. As a resident of this property, and actually someone who does work in urban planning in the electricity sector, I understand the challenges of instituting policy that's consistent with the infrastructure challenges of urban areas. And I have to say I support entirely the intent of this policy, namely to increase groundwater drainage and absorption. And I don't see the current recommendation to be at cross purposes with our own intention to legalize the front parking pad. Instead, I see this as a challenge. And my husband and I have in fact done a significant amount of research on how to improve groundwater absorption on the limited square footage that we do have. We've done research on certain grasses and shrubs and plants that improve drainage, and we understand that it's for our own benefit as much as it is for our neighbors and the residents of the city to avoid further flooding in our city. And I appreciate that these are only representations, but I would like to just speak to some of the efforts that we've made to date that are consistent with this policy. As I mentioned, we purchased this property 3 years ago from a property developer who essentially flipped it. And in doing so, he actually included a illegal parking pad at the rear of the property that was paved in several inches of gravel. Immediately upon taking residence, we've removed all of this and have put down 100% grass and some plants and shrub life. So we've already made significant inroads into increasing the groundwater absorption and drainage on our property. Following the front park pad matter, we also intend to pursue an application for a green roof for the same purpose. So I
Could you,
appreciate.
yeah, you're well over your time. Could you wrap up, please?
Sure,
Thank
yes.
you.
So in conclusion, I would only say that I appreciate the policy intent of this council, and that we look at this as a challenge, and that we feel that we can achieve the purpose of the policy, namely increasing groundwater absorption and drainage while still having a front parking pad. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? There seems to be a din in the room. Any questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Question?
Yeah, I do.
Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the existing conditions and the plans, obviously right now it's kind of gravel and hard surface. Your intention is to add sod on one strip of it and then to also add a permeable surface?
Yes, our intention is to remove the current, or to reduce the current surface area that's covered by interlocking brick to make it much narrower, to put down sod or just full vegetation with maximum absorption. And then the current surface, which is actually paved with a permeable material now, to fully remove that and put down turf stone, which would allow us to sod beneath the turf stone, increase absorption, and so it's really the best case scenario in terms of what our research has yielded in terms of having a surface that supports parking while also supports groundwater absorption.
So for probably 20 or 30 years, there's been a parking here with a surface that's been largely completely not permeable. You're trying to correct that and bring it under compliance.
That's right. It was 100% pavement, is my understanding from speaking to my neighbors who've been there for quite some time. And then the developer put down the permeable surface, which you see now, which is obviously an improvement on the pavement, but we'd like to improve that further.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mario De Clemente? No? George Farkas? Geoferro Properties, Inc.
Even the one up.
Thank you, Mr. Farkas. You have 5 minutes.
We are developers of a property in the same district, and I'm here to support her motion, the appeal of, and to provide for front yard parking. I'm going to talk about the fact that there was a poll made, and the results were overwhelmingly by 40 to 10. 40 residents voted to allow the front yard parking, while 10 negated, and there was some disallowed votes. Now, the purpose of the poll is to see whether the neighbors realize that there's a need for front yard parking, because Cedric is a very narrow street. Any cars parked there will prevent snow shoveling. I know that for a fact. While we were in the building process, it was impossible to have 2 cars parked on the other side. It's a very, very narrow street. To that end, that's why you had 40 people voting in favor of having front yard parking, because they don't want to, they want to make sure that the streets are plowed in the winter and there is less obstruction for cars parked there. It's a very community-minded neighborhood, lots of children, and that's what the purpose behind it. In fact, there are some street bumps on the street to that end. So if we took the time and money spent to poll the neighbors, and since the neighbors are the ones who will be living with it, and they're happy with it, provided, of course, all the conditions are met, meaning permeability, and the previous spokesperson did say they'll do whatever it takes and more to make sure that there is permeability. I think we should recommend it. And one other point, there are some people who are building homes with garages. Now, if you build with a garage and you have a pavement, there's nothing required. You get that as via right. And that does, that basically negates the whole purpose of what we're doing. So instead of building homes with garages, which they have done, and they gave up their garage in the back, instead created the front yard parking, which is, with some landscaping, which camouflages the thing. I think the committee should approve, appeal the decision of the Transportation Department and approve her request for front yard parking. Thank you very much.
Any questions for the deputant, other than myself? Mr. Farkas, if you could just take the mic. I just have a couple of questions, just to make sure I understand some of your comments. It's my understanding that in the poll that was taking place, something close to 70% of residents on the street supported front yard parking.
That is correct.
And one of the problems that I think some of my colleagues will encounter is permit parking is authorized on the same side of the street. But you're saying this street is unusually narrow, and that emergency vehicles, snow removal, and other large vehicles will have enormous problems getting through with on-street parking.
I could tell you that we had to provide what's called shear wall I-beams, and they refused to deliver. We had to get a special crane because they couldn't traverse the street. The flatback was wider than the street. It's a very narrow, unique street.
I wonder whether the historical mistake was allowing permit parking on the street to begin with.
And to further comment, I would say that maybe 80 to 90% of that street between Jasmine and Highland Park have front yard parking. So there's very little left for on-street parking. I know in my case, the trades have to park on other street, and I had to ask my neighbors to allow them to park on their pads. There was no room.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, any other questions? Oh, sorry, Mr. Farkas. Councillor Burnside.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just something that came into my mind. I believe there's permit parking on one side of the street.
That is correct.
Okay, so I just want to understand, your concern is that where cars would be parked on that one side of the street, there still isn't enough room on the rest of the street for a fire truck to get down.
Almost 100%. Yeah, it's very narrow, very narrow.
Only parking on one side of the street.
Pardon me?
Even though there's only parking on one
That
side
is
of the
correct.
street.
I can tell you, in my own eyes, someone backed out, and someone did park just temporarily, smashed his.
I'm more concerned about the fire truck.
Well, as I said, my own experience, they would refuse to deliver those I-beams because they couldn't traverse the street. It was too narrow for them. And look, there's all kinds of fire trucks. The big ones will not, the small ones will, the narrow.
Right, so there is permit parking there now, so I guess your concern is that fire trucks aren't getting down the street.
With difficulty, they will be able, because they could go on the sidewalk, right?
Oh, okay, thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Burnside. Thank you, Mr. Farkas, for coming down. Councillors, any questions to staff? Councillor Burnside.
It's through you to staff. Currently, just to confirm, permit parking is allowed on one side of the street. You can nod. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
Or say yes. Yep. Thanks, Kim. And do you have any concerns about fire trucks getting down the street? Okay. How wide is the street?
I don't have the exact measurement of the street, but no, our street is usually about 8.5 meter in width normally on a local road.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Burnside. Any other questions to staff? No? I understand the local councillor has a motion with alternative recommendations.
I do, Mr. Chair. The old city of York strikes again. For those of you who haven't heard this speech, the wild west of the city of York, parking pads went anywhere and everywhere. You could put them wherever you wanted. If you want to do your own kind of curb cut, go ahead and do it. And so we've got a situation where we've got thousands and thousands in my ward and Nunziata's and Palacios of front yard parking pads that have really been a blight on neighborhoods for a long time. And I commend residents who are trying to say, you know what, I don't want the illegal pad. I want to pay. I want to bring it in conformity. And I actually want to make it more environmentally friendly. And this is a case where they're saying they want to add a permeable surface, add some soft landscaping, some vegetation to improve what the condition has been there for the last 30 years. The reality of the parking supply and demand on these streets, for those of us who want to say, well, let's just get all those cars off these front yard parking pads, get rid of them, they're evil, these streets cannot accommodate the number of cars. The urban form and the built form is different, and so unless people are just going to all of a sudden get rid of them all, it's just not going to happen. There's nowhere for these cars to go on the street in these neighborhoods, on streets like Cedric and Jesmond and other streets around actually where I live. And so I'm moving that the parking area, the appeal be granted, and that the alternate conditions specify that it not exceed 5.9 meters in length. They have to remove the existing gravel. They have to disconnect any downspouts if feasible. Applicant has to pay the enforcement fee of $719. The applicant must provide the landscape features substantially in accordance with the plan as indicated in attachment A. And I think it'll make a great improvement not only to that property, but to the neighborhood to have what is proposed in front of us instead of what's been there for generations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is that written up by the?
It's in your.
Okay, it's an alternative
It's the
recommendation.
alternative recommendations on
Embedded in the
page
report, which
3 of the
permits-
report.
Right, which permits the.
Items 1 through 6.
Any other speakers on the item? I will speak very briefly. Normally, I don't support parking pads, but in this case, the report speaks for itself. Somewhere in the vicinity of 70% of the residents on the street support the use of parking pads. It's a very narrow street, which on-street parking could impede the snow removal or emergency vehicles getting through. The photograph before you shows that the residents in question has done actually what I think is a very appealing job in making sure that the parking pad is aesthetically appealing, that is permeable, and that fits in and lends itself to the neighborhood. Should also bring your attention to the fact that on page 3 of the report, the property does meet many of the physical characteristics of the code, such as the setback. So we're not seeing a car parked right on sort of the front lawn, angled toward the sidewalk. This is meeting some of the existing code requirements, which we rarely see when it comes to parking pads. So for that reason, I will be supporting the local councilor's alternative recommendations to allow the parking pad at this residence, and that with the conditions that go along with it. And I think that'll be fair to both the local residents as well as those using the street on a regular basis, and also ensure that we don't have a tragedy on our hands through the transporting of people through our ambulance service or the impeding of fire services to get through the street as well. So I would lend my support to the alternative recommendations before us. Any other speakers? Councillor Burnside?
Yeah, just to make a very quick point, that there are actually, from the report, there are actually 29 spots that allow for permit parking, only 6 have been issued. In terms of the concern about fire trucks, we did look at the pictures, and I think that that's clearly been taken into consideration in the allowance of the issuance of permits and the city allowing parking on one side of the street. There don't seem to be any concerns for fire trucks getting down that particular road, and I'll be voting against I'll be supporting the staff motion.
Councillor Minnan-Wong?
Their flooding problems are as bad as, you know, maybe even no worse than the rest of the city. So these permeable parking pads, I don't believe that with the rainfall, the storms that we're getting and the amount of rainfall, that those, I call BS on their capacity to absorb moisture in the amount of rain that we're getting and the amount of time that we're getting. I don't think that's a solution that we should be looking at, so I'm voting against it.
Okay. Any other speakers on the issue? No? Okay, the motion before us is the alternative recommendations to allow the parking pad with conditions. All those in favor? Yeah, record a vote. The clerk could. Do you want to call out the name? Or I could. Councillor Perusa, Councillor Cole, Councillor Carmichael Grab, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Fillion in favor. Those opposed? Councillor Robinson, Councillor Carroll, and Councillor Burnside opposed. Oh, and Councillor Minnan-Wong opposed. It carries. Item 40, Councillor Carmichael Grab, 450 Woburn Avenue, front yard parking appeal.
Yes, I will be deferring this item until the November meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to defer. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 41, front yard parking appeal, 452 Woburn Avenue. Councillor Carmichael Grab.
I will be deferring this item as well until the November meeting.
All right, it looks like November's going to be busy. Motion to defer is on the floor. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 42, application to remove a private tree, 25 Norcross Road, that's Ward 10. We do have a speaker on that, Yuri Kontas.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Sorry for the form of presentation, but I'll do it this way. This is a part of the site plan of our property, which we bought 4 years ago as a rundown, rented out for 5 years bungalow, and we're trying to make it into something decent for us to live in for long, long years. You see this whole area here is our backyard. Basically, it's all green space available to us. These cross-hatched areas are the spruce trees. One of them we applied to be removed, and we had a forest committee recommendation to keep it. We appreciate the job that the forestry committee is doing, and we would gladly keep the tree, but the problem is that we have 5 of them on the property, and each of them covers a circle of 24 to 30 feet diameter, which basically takes about 40% of entire green area of our backyard. And everything that in that area looks like this. So that's 40% of our backyard. We try to do a nice landscaping. We planted 7 trees already in the backyard wherever is possible, but we only can do it like on the peripheral along the fences. We're not asking for much, I think, and this tree that is in the middle will allow us to free up significant area because it's sort of tying together 3 other trees, and by removing one we will free up a significant green area. So I'm hoping maybe committee will take a more balanced approach and will recommend us replacing this tree with any suitable trees that we can have in our backyard when we have room for them, or anywhere else. We only last year we tried to sort of come up with some way of increasing our green area. We tried to sod a little bit closer to these trees, but the problem is that anything within 15 to 20 feet radius from these trees, after 1 week, this is fresh installed sod. After 1 week, I would call it a pine cone attack. When they drop pine cones, if they there for about a week, that's what's happening to new sod. They burn it to the soil. So I'm hoping that the council will look into this and maybe recommend us to replace this tree with anything that you consider suitable. Thank you.
Any questions for the deputant? I just have a quick question, but it looks like you've got a forest in your backyard.
Yes, exactly. I didn't even mention that. It looks like a minor inconvenience. Lots of people have big trees covering like backyard, and like even if you Google the area and look at our backyard, the entire backyard from back to the house covered in shades. There's no sun across the entire backyard because of these trees. And inside of them is dark area because they fighting for room with their branches. So inside is quite dark, and my wife is even concerned with ticks falling down. I'm not sure about that, but anyways, that's one of the thoughts. Yeah, we have a kind of forest. We would be very happy to have softwood trees, something leafy that we used to.
All right. Okay.
To have in our culture. So.
All right. Now, if we approve the request for the tree removal, staff are requesting 5 replacement trees, which can be achieved in a combination of on-site planting and cash in lieu. Are you aware of that condition?
Yes.
And can you live with it?
Yeah, I think we can.
Okay. Any other questions for the deputant? Councillor Carroll.
Sorry, I do have a follow-up question. The picture that we have in our report, beside the tree, there's a couple of, what looks like a couple of skids of paving stones
Paving
sitting there.
stone. Yeah, we were doing paving back at the house It's just construction people just move them there to free up the way. They're gone now. Oh, sorry, I don't have the picture, but the backyard looks very nice now, except for this lost wasteland.
And you said that you've planted 7 other trees, but
We
on the
planted
edge, what are they-
7.
That's a lot of trees in a backyard.
They're
Are they
not large
cedars
trees.
along one side or something?
Yes, no, they're not large trees because we don't want to like sort of close our backyard even more when these spruces are there. They're European beeches and Japanese maple.
And in the aerial view, do you have a swimming pool at the back?
Yes.
Okay.
We sort of inherited with the house. It
Okay.
wasn't our choice. So
Okay.
that's why the green area so relatively small. And these trees are a real issue for us.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions of the deputant? No? Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
We're on item 42, application to remove a private tree, 25 Norcross. Any questions for staff? I just have one, if nobody else does. To forestry, the condition here of planting 5 replacement trees, I guess a combination of on-site planting and cash in lieu of planting, in a backyard that's already quite crammed with trees and other amenities. Don't you think that request is a bit excessive?
The 5-to-1 replacement ratio that we're recommending is a standard recommendation when we deny permits and they get on appeal to community council. That's why we offer the option of a cash in lieu instead of planting on the site. There's also typically options with planting a variety of different trees that may grow at different rates to accommodate the site.
What would this cost the homeowner if they decided to plant 1 tree and pay the rest in cash?
So the cash in lieu value is $583 for each tree not planted on site. The cost of planting on site is a variable cost, which could depend on where the property owner sources the materials or who they have installed the material.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Yeah, Councillor Carroll.
Just a quick question, because I'm looking at the site now. Was it did you visit the site, or was it one of your staff that visited the site?
It would have been other staff that visited this
okay.
particular site.
They didn't know whether or not the pool has a proper enclosure?
That I don't know.
Okay, thanks. Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for staff? I have a motion. I'm going to approve the request to remove the tree. It looks like this homeowner has doing more than his fair share of contributing to our tree canopy and our tree planting strategy. It looks like he's doing the best to enjoy his property and embrace the philosophy of the city to have as many trees as possible toward the 40% tree canopy goal. It is also our responsibility to try and find a balance. I have my amendment is on the screen. The homeowner probably understands that it could cost him a lot of money not to plant all 5 trees, but I'll put that on the floor. I think we have to balance off the goals of our forestry department, as well as the balancing of the quiet enjoyment of private property. And based on the diagram that I saw, this homeowner is certainly doing his fair share in the number of trees that are on the site and the willingness to provide replacement trees or cash in lieu of planting. Any other speakers? My motion is before you. All those in favor? Four? Five. Five in favor? Those opposed? One. That carries. Next is timed item 11:45, item 43, application to remove a private tree at 42 Moss Grove Trail. I have a deputant, Dean Constant. You're Mr. Constant?
Yes, I am.
Okay, are you the homeowner or?
I am.
Okay, great. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, councilors. A picture is worth 1,000 words. That's our spruce tree. I'll just bring it back. I just read your agenda here, and I underlined it. Hello? I underlined that there's no financial impact in your agenda. I contest this, my wife and I contest this, as there is a financial impact for both us and the city. This is my wife's original email to Urban Forestry. I just, it's hard to put the phone over. Okay, I can read it. So contesting on your agenda that there's no financial impact, issue one, we spent a significant amount of time, money, and effort extracting roots from our drainage system. Plumbers have advised us to resolve this. We have to pay $3,300 to put in a pipe. Urban Forestry said, go ahead, do this. That is a financial impact to us. We are dealing with elder care issues right now anyway. So if we do this, Urban Forestry says it's not going to impact our tree by putting in this new line. There is no guarantee, according to the drainage people, that there won't be any impact on the tree by putting this, by installing this. So that's an impact. The other impacts for the city, while the tree is beautiful, I'm gonna put back this picture of the tree. I don't need to put it. You have a picture of the tree anyway. While the tree is beautiful, it should never have been planted so close to the house. It's a very mature tree, and it poses risks to structures all around: wind, ice, snow. We have serious concerns that it will fall towards the houses. I'm going to put the picture up because a picture is worth 1,000 words again. So that's a financial impact, a potential financial impact for the city. The branches, now, the Urban Forestry, they contest this. They said, no, that's not going to happen. The branches pose visual obstructions. The Urban Forestry says to prune it. And the placement of the tree, there was a maple tree right here. You know, when we brought in Urban Forestry to assess our spruce tree, they saw that our maple tree was dying. And they went ahead, marked the maple tree, and they said, we're going to remove this maple tree. Well, what about the spruce tree? We asked. Well, anyway, that's how we got into the discussion of the maple tree. The maple tree, we think, died as a result of this spruce tree. Urban Forestry doesn't think so. That's another reason why we'd like to remove the spruce tree. And to conclude, in the Lawrence area, by the way, thank you, Jay Robinson, for your efforts in our area. In the Lawrence area, I'm just going to the City of Toronto, basement flooding issues all along the city. The City of Toronto has been removing tree canopies because of flooding issues. And we noticed in the Bayview Post, 2013, the City of Toronto will overhaul the sewage system to mitigate stormwater and basement flood, and more than 100 trees will be removed to resolve this issue. We're just asking for one tree to be removed because of all these issues. So I think this is relevant, and I also think that's it. I just think that this is relevant to our case.
Shows that trees cause basement flooding?
Yes. Oh, did I put you on mute? I did.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that this is causing, I'm saying the city has decided to remove several trees in the Lawrence Park area because of basement flooding. And if the city will remove several trees, we have a basement flooding issue, actually a sewage backup because of our tree. And I
And I know that they removed trees in my area where they've done basement flooding work. That's because they dug close to the roots. They cut so many of the roots that the tree was going to die and they had to remove it. They would have had to remove it anyways. Otherwise, it would have fallen over. That's the only reason and the only time that as part of the basement flooding program, trees are removed. So your statement to just simply say they removed some trees because of basement flooding.
I'm not saying because of basement
Oh,
flooding.
So because they.
I'm saying because of basement flooding, they've had to remove several trees.
Because they trenched near them and cut the roots.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm just finding a related article to basement flooding. Basement flooding, in our case, is the actual trees' roots
Yeah,
going.
I wasn't clear. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions for staff? No? Let's go to a speakers list. I think Councillor Carroll has a motion, or is at least moving with staff recommendations. Oh.
Denzel screwed it up.
Denzel muted us all.
It's all part of the conspiracy.
Try it now.
Is that, still not working. I can belt it out if you want. Oh, no, now it is. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I hear the deputant's concerns, and spruce trees are hard, but I'm going to have to insist or I'm going to require that we look at the staff's body of the report, and I'm going to be moving staff's recommendations because we run into this. I run into this in my area a lot because I have a flooding area, and a plumber arrives on the site and tells you one thing. Science and arborists tell you yet another. Pipes do break down. Roots will actually grow around a pipe. If the pipe is not corroded and not broken, roots will just wrap around them and keep it going and don't actually kill the water infrastructure. But pipes do break down, and if they do, and if there is an opening, that's when roots invade them. This tree is 6 meters away from the house. It's 4 meters away from the water infrastructure in question, the sewer that needs to be redone. And on that basis, staff are saying you could even set up a tree protection zone according to our policy, and only a slight amount of that tree protection zone would be encroached in order to do the project of doing the sewers. And at the end of the day, what we have is a massive tree that really demonstrates our private tree bylaw, if no other tree does. And so I'm going to be moving staff's recommendation, and it's really based on the body of the report. If people have not read it, they should scan it now, because while the deputy does raise issues, staff have addressed the issues in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Staff recommendations to deny the request for a permit to remove are before us.
Could I just say, I'll just be 30 seconds because I know we're under a time crunch. I'm going to support the constituent based on his feedback and concerns.
Councillor Robinson is speaking against the item before us. Okay, all those in favor of the staff recommendation to deny the request. That's 5 in favor, and those opposed? 3 opposed. That carries. The request is denied. Item 44, application to remove a tree, 12 Androsasson Place. We have deputant Barbara Ricafort. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes. I understand are you the homeowner?
I am one of the homeowners, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My children actually wanted to attend today to speak on their behalf. However, as you know, school started yesterday, so they are at school today. They have written letters, which I would like to read today. The first letter is from my daughter, Jessica. Hello, my name is Jessica. I would be grateful if the tree in my backyard would be taken down. First, I am allergic to the nuts that grow on the tree. Second, squirrels tear apart the nuts, and that is not safe for me because they spread them all over. Third, when I play outside, my doctors told me that my sister and I must take off our clothes and shoes every time after we play. I can live with my allergy. For example, my mom packs me a nut-free treat when I go to birthday parties. If I play in the park and I see nutshells, I avoid that playground. This tree is part of my home, but I cannot enjoy my backyard and play in it like other kids can. This makes me feel very sad because it is one more thing that I can't do because of my allergy. Please help me stay safe in my home. From Jessica Ricafort. Our 8-year-old daughter also felt compelled to write something. It's interesting to see an 8-year-old's perspective. Hello, my name is Brooke, and I think that we should cut down the tree because my sister has a nut allergy, and there are nuts on that tree, so she can't play in our backyard. There are many squirrels that tear apart the nuts and leave them there. Also, their nuts fall anywhere and everywhere, and we can slip and fall and get hurt. Please think about this letter and do what you can to take down this tree. Sincerely, Brooke Ricafort. Every child has the right to grow up in a safe environment, away from risk, especially risks that may be potentially life-threatening. As parents, it is our job to provide that safety for our children. We're not asking the city to remove a tree that's in a public park, rather one that is on the property of our home, which we are more than happy to replace with a new tree. We're only doing what any parent would do to make their home a safe place to raise their children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Ricafort? I assume this is husbands and homeowner.
Hi, thank you. We had a prepared presentation that we were going to put up, but you don't have the ability to connect a laptop, so I'm going to kind of wing it here. I'm going to share with you, and as you've heard from my wife, we initially applied to have this tree removed on the basis of our daughter's medical condition, which is supported by our doctor's letters, our doctor's letter and an allergist letter. And over time, as we were rejected and as we further reviewed our arborist report, as well as speaking to our neighbors, we've come to learn there's also structural issues around this tree. The arborist report had said that the tree itself is in fair to poor condition. there have been large branches that have come down over the last couple of weeks that were not weather-related. They just come down because of the sheer weight of the trees, of the tree, as well as the leaves and the nuts that it bears. So I also ask this council, if you're not going to look at this based on the medical condition of my daughter and the fact that she can't even enjoy her own backyard, is to consider this from a structural perspective and the liability risk it provides to us as homeowners, to our neighbors. I'm going to just quickly show the sheer size of this tree, but also how it's located on our street, and the fact that it's bordered on 3 sides by homes. And there are probably about 15 homes here that are at risk when this tree comes down, whether it's by lightning strike, which it has been struck, or the structural risks that condition it's in. The city's own urban forestry department had indicated that the likelihood of this tree, when it comes down, that it is a high likelihood of it striking one of these homes and structures or garages, and that the impact of that would be severe. So I actually struggle with how to come and speak to you as council, because I look at it as a parent in protecting my child, but I also look at it from a liability perspective for myself and my neighbors. And if we're unable to avail ourselves of our liability, then where does that liability then fall if we fail at council? I know that the staff recommendation had said to replace with 5 trees, and we're more than happy to do so. It is expensive to do so, and it's something I would do myself to plant on our own yard. But again, I look at it as if the city loses 1 tree, you're going to gain 5. And so we're actually investing in the city's future tree canopy and something that we truly support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question, Councillor Burnside. Questions for the deputant?
Yeah, thank you. Through you. When did you move to this home?
We actually haven't even moved in. We took possession in February. We are from the neighborhood. We lived in Calgary the last 5 years, and we recently moved back. So we're under renovations, and we have yet to occupy the home.
So you bought the home knowing there's a black walnut tree on the property and your child has an allergy?
Well, yes, but our real estate agent also said, you just apply to the city and they'll allow you to remove it. The other thing I'd also say is, you have to remember what it was like to try and buy a house in the fall of last year. And we had lived in Calgary and lost money on our house, only to come back to the city and our old house is $1 million more. So the delta is huge, and properties were hard to come by. We actually we bought the house almost sight unseen from Calgary.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Burnside. Any other questions for the deputant? No?
Make a suggestion. I don't know if council is open to this, but it was suggested to me by somebody who has a bit more experience on this type of file that we refer this to the general manager of forestry for additional review. I don't know if people think that's a good idea, or because it seems like a bit of a complicated case.
A motion to refer is always in order from my knowledge of the rules of order, and we can...
Or unless somebody has another suggestion.
Well, I'm just concerned that urban forestry in chit-chat with public health are denying all of what these parents say about allergies, and that concerns me. I assume this family has a family physician, that it relies on the advice, maybe an allergist.
If I could... If I could add something.
Well, maybe I will ask a question. Do you want to move your motion to refer?
It was just a suggestion, because we are running out of time. It seems to be a bit of a complicated case, but I'm open to what council thinks, or if people have better ideas. So I'll place the motion.
The motion is before us. I think the item should be deferred, and we should bring it back with more expertise about allergies, quite frankly. But okay.
I'm open to
You're
any
referring it back to forestry?
I'm referring to specifically to the general manager of urban forestry to review this in more depth.
Okay, is that Richard Ubbins? Okay.
No, it's not. It's Jason Doyle.
Okay, a motion to refer is before us. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. There's a chance that, a very good chance that this will come back to us at a future date. Please stay in touch with your local counselor. And thank you very much for coming. Sorry it's still unresolved.
Can I just ask quickly, is this defer to the general manager to look at it from a structural perspective or the medical perspective?
Well, it'll be everything. And we may ask him to be here for next time this comes forward. Item 45, application to remove a city tree, 41 Cameron Crescent. I don't have any. Oh, we have a late deputant, John Pop. Great, thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Great, thank you very much. I too am my name's John Pop. I'm a contractor and representing Teresa, who's building this house. I just want to show you a quick picture of the tree. That's basically, we've added a second, this is the before shot. We're adding a second story addition. The tree is actually much bigger than when we took this picture 2 years ago. This next picture is not that great, but it's current in the sense that you see already in the short time that we've had it, it's growing and expanding. It's about 9 feet away from the foundation. We've updated all the weeping tile systems on this house as well. And as you can see on the top right-hand side, it's in touch with the new house. This is a corner lot. And the homeowner would like, for the multiple reasons of basically it impacting her weeping tile. Right here, we're putting a walkway. The roots will eventually disturb that. There's a constant issue with creating shade, getting into the house. There's going to be future issues with the eaves trough system and the trees growing on the tile. I'm not quite sure what the maintenance or who's responsible for maintenance of a city tree. But in essence, what we're asking for is to have this tree removed for those reasons. That's essentially it.
Great, thank you very much. Just very quickly, could I have a motion to extend to finish the agenda? Councillor Perusa, all those in favor? It's carried. Sorry, back to the deputant. You are finished, and any questions for the deputant? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Questions for staff?
Can I go?
Yes.
Thank you. Through you to staff, how big is the tree now?
It measures 20 centimeters in diameter.
Okay, and it's on city property. If this tree were to come down, what are the options?
The option would be to replant a replacement tree somewhere else on city property, fronting the site, and payment of the appraised value.
Okay, and so it's 20 centimeters in diameter. What size of tree could we request to be planted in lieu of the one potentially coming down?
Typically, the max size would be 80 millimeters caliper, or 8 centimeters, standard.
So just under half?
About, yeah.
It would take how long to, a tulip tree I think it is, how long would it take to get to that 20 centimeters, do you think?
Well, this tree was planted in 2001.
So 15?
So it's taken about that much time to...
15 years?
Approximately.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnside. Any other questions for the deputant? No? We're eager to move it along. Speakers, questions for staff? No? Okay. Councillor Burnside, are you going to move the staff recommendations or no? Okay, well, I will move the staff recommendations to deny the request to permit the removal of the tree. I'll take that role as just as the chair. No other reasons. Any other people want to speak to it? No speakers? All those in favor, adopting staff recommendations? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 2. That carries. The request is denied. Item number 46, request for a fence exemption, 129 Connaught. This is Councillor Fillion. Staff to the floor. Oh. Oh, I'm sorry. We've had a late request to depute. Paul Guest. Is there Paul Guest? Oh, there he is. Okay, great. Thanks very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, hi, I'm from Betts Pools. We installed the pool. The fence already existed when we installed the pool. It was put up by the builder-developer, so it was 8 feet high and horizontal boards. So we're applying for an exemption on the horizontal and the height at 8 feet. It's non-climbable, so it meets the definition of a fence enclosure for a pool. So that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? What's wrong? You are counting correctly. We are short of quorum. Yes. We're good. We're good. What happened to our deputant? Any questions for the deputant? No? Any speakers? Questions of staff?
It's my understanding that subsequent to the writing of this report that there's new guidelines that would say that this fence is okay. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. A directive did come out from our director, Mark Scraga, dated August 3rd. I believe this report was already written and submitted prior to that coming out. The directive does speak to the wood fence, specifically horizontals. And my understanding from the officer who went back out, it would meet the requirements according to this directive. However, it was left on the agenda because there's also a height restriction, and that would have to come before council again.
Okay. And if I was going to move recommendation 2, which I'm intending to, where it says subject to conditions, I'm not at all clear on what those conditions are.
Again, through the chair, I believe that's a standard report. The wording is always put in should council decide to add any conditions.
Okay, so I can just remove that because I don't have any conditions to add. Well, subject to what conditions? So that's what I'm asking.
It would go back to to recommendation 1.
Yeah, I know, but that makes no sense. Recommendation 1 is to refuse the application.
That's how the report was written.
Okay, so
we might want to strike that if,
okay.
yeah.
Thank you. So I think it's a simple request. There's no safety issues according to staff, so I'll just move grant the application for a fence exemption permit, period.
Okay, recommendation number 2 has been moved by Counselor Filion. Any questions to staff? Any speakers? No? All those in favor? Opposed? Recommendation 2 carries. Item 47, request for fence exemption, 108 Elmhurst Avenue. We do have speakers. Christine Douglas. Thank you, Ms. Douglas, for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for having me. First of all, I'd like to show the aerial photograph, which is with your documents. This is my house next door. This is the house requesting the fence. It's much larger than the aerial photo they submitted, which is the old story and a half. The neighbors at 108 are asking to install a much higher fence than my 6'3" wooden fence at the backyard. I recently installed a brand new chain link fence on the property line to replace the damaged fence that they caused during the construction of their house. There's also a small fence which belongs to me, and they want to erect another tall fence at the front yard. This is the previous fence that they damaged. They put a hole in it. It wasn't straight, very old fence. The fence that was installed by me recently is a brand new fence, straightened and on the property line according to my survey in 1998. These neighbors have not taken care of their property. Their weeds encroach onto my side of the house. I've asked them for a number of years to clean up their property, which they have refused. They've been uncooperative with me for many, many years. I've lived there since 2011, at the beginning of 2011. The problem with the neighbors is constant basement flooding. They have continually destroyed my home in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I'm faced with. I believe they want that fence erected to prevent me from conducting any repairs to my home and property. The city spends hundreds of thousands of dollars advertising basement flooding, and no one is assisting me in making these repairs. Their old house, this was their old house, which they took down in 2015. Now, I'm a senior citizen, and I've lived next door to these people since 2000.
You lost your mic there.
I'm getting very little for property taxes I've been paying for 7 years. I, along with my neighbors, are opposed to the next door neighbor's request for a fence. They've caused problems for not only me, but for the elderly female neighbor on the other side of their property. They damaged the fence in the backyard and the hedge at the front yard, separating the properties. They also damaged my wooden fence at the back when their contractor stood on it with power tools, no harnesses, and trimming their trees, which are encroaching on my property. I picked up shingles from their old 1920s house, which kept blowing into my driveway along with their garbage. They refused to remove the trees next to the property line in close proximity to my house, causing damage to my eaves troughs, which I replaced in 2012 and again in 2014. They were uncooperative. They refused to remove numerous trees and vegetation banging on the side of my house, disturbing my sleep. The owner's husband tried to bully me when I was pulling out their weeds, which continued to overgrow on my property with the assistance of my other neighbor. In 2014, they conducted underpinning without a building permit due to the flooding in their basement, and they refused to allow me to make repairs to my basement, which they also flooded. In 2015, when they decided to tear down their old 1920s house and build the present structure, they're unqualified and
If you could wrap up, you're at your 5-minute limit.
Yes. Well, they've caused extensive damage to my home and property, which I'm faced with. The city has refused to grant me a right of entry permit to remove the fence and have the excavation redone to protect my home from the water damage, which they continue to cause. My neighbors are upset with the structure.
We got the message. You don't get along with your neighbors. We understand that. You live next door and you're fighting this fence exemption request.
Yes, I am.
Okay. We just need a little context. Okay. Councillor Burnside has a question for
I'll
you.
be very quick. So I understand all the neighbor issues, but how would the exemption, the fence exemption, negatively impact you?
There's already a chain link fence between our property. Now, if they erect this tall fence, they're doing it to deliberately prevent me from excavating my property, because that fence has to be removed for the equipment to come in and have it re-excavated, which I had done once.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Any more questions for the deputant? Any questions for staff? Any speakers? Oh, I do apologize. There are 2 other speakers. Ted Dowson? Is there a Ted Dowson here? Okay. Mr. Dowson, thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes. Just for context, if you could... That's fine. If you could give us context to what your relationship is with 108 Elmhurst. Are you the owner or neighbor?
Is this microphone? Yes, it's working. Yes, my wife is listed as the owner. We are the owners, so I'm the husband.
Okay.
Yes. And William Yu, the other speaker, is my nephew. We are always on the property. We've tried to fix up our property. We've done a complete renovation. It's virtually finished. We've asked for this fence exemption primarily for privacy, so we can enjoy our property, and also for aesthetics. We've had years of harassment and interference from 106 Elmhurst, and I don't want to take up your time with the details. The councillor's office, Councillor Fillion's office, and municipal standards are well aware of the issues and the file. It's extensive. So we are asking for this. Regarding the front side yard fence exemption, I do have a photograph because our front yard has been placed under surveillance for at least the last 3 years by the camera owned by Christine Douglas. Her camera is not pointed at her property, it is pointed at our property from the front door to the street, and it is continuously there. I just wanted you to be aware of that. We would like our privacy so we can enjoy our property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? He did not use any overheads. Thank you, Councillor Perusa, for co-chairing. Third deputant on this item 47 is William Yu. And if you could just give us context, your relationship with 108 Elmhurst Avenue.
Hello. I'm a nephew of my uncle that is commuting for this case.
Do you live there, or?
Yes, I currently live with them.
You live at 108 Elmhurst.
And
okay.
being the past 2 or 3 years, when I was working in the garden, when we're fixing our house, doing the like construction job. She would just come out with her camera
Okay,
taking picture of
okay.
us.
Enough.
That's just for the.
Can we focus on their request for a fence, I guess your request for a fence exemption, and whether that has merit or not, rather than
Well, yeah, that's the reason, because
throwing muck?
the reason we request for fence, because she keeps taking a picture of us, so it's kind of against our privacy in our house, enjoying the house.
Okay,
So that's the like,
that's the gist of it.
yeah, just.
All right, any questions for the deputant? No? Any questions for staff? Well, I feel sorry for Councillor Fillion. Councillor Fillion, what did you want to do with this?
Well, these disputes between neighbors are always difficult, but I am going to move recommendation 2. And if I lived at this address, I might well ask for the same thing.
All right, option number 2, recommendation number 2 is on the floor. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Item 48, request for fence exemption, 107 Tanjo Crescent. We do have a speaker, Anatoly Malashevsky. Mr. Malashevsky, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Sorry. I'm here to request a fence exemption to maintain a security and privacy. Property is a corner lot, and this is an existing fence built around the side yard, which called flankage yard also, by previous owner. I own property for 7 years, and none of my neighbors expressed any safety or any other concern during this time. In May, I was notified that my fence is not compliant to section 447-2C. This is a bylaw section requirement, and deficiency is a sight line obstruction. Intent of this bylaw, as far as I understand, is to maintain a line of sight and prevent obstruction of view of a boulevard or the highway. So to address the safety concern, I would like to propose to install a convex security mirrors at or near the driveway to provide a clear view of all oncoming pedestrian traffic. So here's what I mean. This will provide an unobstructed view of a sidewalk in both directions for any person backing out of the driveway. Thank you very much for your time. One comment that it's not something unusual. I saw council decisions, allowing fence exemption if convex mirror are installed. So that's all.
All right, any questions for the deputant? Any questions for staff? Nothing about these mirrors? Okay. Councillor Fillion, what would you like to do?
This is a pretty clear-cut one. If you look at the photos, there's obviously a safety issue, a site obstruction, and I understand from staff it could be corrected without major work here. For some reason, the applicant has chosen not to do that and proposed some kind of mirror installation instead. So I'm going to move the recommendation 1 to refuse the application.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councillor Fillion, I was just momentarily distracted. Are you moving, You refuse, okay, I do apologize for that. A motion to the staff recommendation to refuse, recommendation number 1 is on the floor. All those in favor? Okay, that opposed? That carries. The motion is out of order. We've already passed a motion to finish the agenda. And you can't leave because we need you for quorum. Now we go back to item 35. I believe we held that item down. No, we have a few items to go. Did you pack a box lunch? Maybe you want to nibble a little bit while we're working? No? Okay. Payment in lieu of parking, 1940, 1942 Avenue Road. Councillor Carmichael Grab, I believe we held this item down.
Yes, I believe, well, no, there was clarification that was requested, so I don't know if we just want to give the clarification quickly, and then I will move my motion.
Maybe we want to defer this to the next meeting.
So to answer Councilor Carroll's question about the payment for... Yeah.
You don't want to defer this? Don't you normally defer all your items to?
She did have a question.
Yikes.
Okay, I'll just move it then.
Okay, no, but let staff answer, even though Councillor Carroll's not here.
Okay.
Staff should answer the question
So
for the rest of us.
Yeah, so the answer is we're not changing the parking rate, parking in lieu rate. It is the comment was to for 3 additional parking spaces. The 14 parking spaces was applied to the entire building. The review of this application was for the addition of 260, increase of a 264 square meter of gross floor area. So based on that, the parking requirement is only for 3 parking spaces, and the parking rate is $5,000 per space.
Okay, for those who don't know what to do with this, this does come to City Council, is that correct? So if you're unhappy with what's going on here on this issue, you can fight it on the council floor in October.
I have a motion.
There's a motion by Councillor Carmichael Grab.
So my motion is City Council exempt the applicant at 1940 42 Avenue Road from the City of Toronto zoning bylaw parking requirement of 14 spaces subject to a $5,000 payment in lieu of parking for the actual shortfall of 3 spaces for the proposed building expansion, provided that the applicant signs a payment in lieu of parking agreement with the city to the satisfaction of the city solicitor. This isn't a developer that's building a new building, which has happened in the area, and much more substantial payment in lieu has come into effect. This is for a renovation so that some doctors and dentists can move out of a building that's being torn down at the end of December, so that they can stay in the area, so that local residents who use these medical services can have their medical services close by. So we need to keep medical services in the area in cases where medical buildings are being torn down and condos are being put up. I would love to see the doctors and dentists stay in the area. 2 other buildings down the street, which have similar renovations, some a bit bigger, were not given any, there was no requirement for payment in lieu. So this came through committee that they pay some payment in lieu, so I think this is fair. There's no parking there now. There's 2 green pea lots in the area, and I hope you support my motion. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Carroll.
Yes, I'm happy to see that we're moving an alternate recommendation, because the report does speak to the fact that in reality it's 3 spaces. However, I cannot support changing the amount. My reason for wanting to change it for 3 spaces so that it was clear that we were following the policy, that the 15,000 was arrived at because we were talking about 3 spaces. I'm now seeing a reduced amount, and that I can't support. But I do think that council ought to have a chance to actually dispense with the item today. So I'm going to move an amendment that Councillor Grebs mentioned, a motion I should say, be amended to read subject to a $15,000 payment in lieu of parking, because that is our policy. Payment in lieu per parking space is $5,000. So I'm simply going to move an amendment of the sum of money so that people have a chance to vote on both rates. But I'm in support of the rest of the motion, because the recommendation in this motion, save and accept the amount of money being changed, does reflect the body of the report talking about the real impact is 3 spaces. So if I could have that amendment simply to amend the sum of $5,000 to 15.
Okay. All right. Is Councilor Carroll, you have an amendment to amend?
Yes, my amendment is simply to change it so that it reads subject to a $15,000 payment in lieu of parking. That would then make this a motion that entirely reflects the staff body of the report, that the real impact is 3 parking spaces, and that our rate per parking space when we're calculating payment in lieu is $5,000 per parking space.
We don't really have that on the screen, do we?
I'm asking that it be added as an amendment so that our usual procedure is, if that is the case, we would first vote on my amendment of $15,000, which may or may not succeed, and then afterwards we would vote on this motion.
Okay. All right. So we'll vote on Councilor Carroll's amendment, and I hope everybody, even though it's not in writing, I hope everybody understands what they're voting for. So all those in favor of Councilor Carroll's amendment? 3, and those opposed? 4. And on the amendment moved by Councilor Carmichael Greb, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. And do we need to move the item as amended, or we're good? All right, so we have to go to item number 15. Item number 15, all-way stop control at Glengarry and Welland Road. It's Councillor Carmichael Greb. That was held down. Councillor Carroll, this was held down for you. I believe you had questions for staff. It's all-way stop control at Glengarry and Welland Road. Oh, 15. Well, do you want to defer this item?
If I can just...
Councillor Carmichael Greb?
Do you want to defer it? Yeah. Yeah, just have some questions of staff. Is there another